Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Indra in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 41, A Conversation with an Old Friend. Naruto didn't let any of his conflicting feelings show on his face. Toru hadn't changed that much, overall. Sure, he was fairly tall now, looking very much like his half-brother Shisui, with his curly dark hair, and had the typical Uchiha physique, being lithely built. He was wearing a black eye patch over his right eye. Naruto found his throat pretty dry. Toru, then. I'm Indra, nice to meet you. He bowed politely. Aw, come on, don't be so polite, otherwise I'm going to feel I have to be, too. You're like a village leader, right? Naruto sighed. Something like that. Fucking Orochimaru. They walked through the village. Are you familiar with Konoha's history, Indra? Toru asked him. He would at least try his best to be polite. Man, they really should have asked attack dash. Nah, never mind, his cousin was a bit too stiff. Indra shrugged. Just call me Indra. Also. Somewhat, yes. I know it was founded by Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara, about half a century ago. Well, that's true. Toru conceded. Madara left pretty soon after, though, and he's kinda infamous, especially in our clan. Because he left. Well, that, and he tried to come back with the Nine Tails to destroy it. Indra suppressed a minute twitch of his lips. So the man had a sense of humor, if a dark one. Ah, yes. That would likely do the trick. And he was pretty difficult to deal with in general, according to our elders. Bad temper. The worst. What happened to him, after that whole Nine Tails thing? Indra asked. He died fighting Senju Hashirama, our first Hokage. Indra nodded. That's the man on the mountain. He pointed at the cliff. One of them, yes. The one on the left. We carved all 5 of our Hokage's faces into it, as a memorial. The 5th is alive, though. A living memorial. Toru amended. Kinda tacky. Toru snorted. Right. But well, the clan's pretty happy that an Uchiha's finally Hokage, anyway. Why? Who were the others? In order. After Senju Hashirama, we have his brother, Senju Tobirama, this one's student, Sarutobi Hiruzen, and his grand student, I guess? Well, the student of his student. Sounds a lot like nepotism to me. Indra shrugged. Well. There's a reason our clan was a bit sour about it. So is the 5th the 4th student or something? Toru laughed. No. No, he's actually a bit older than the 4th, and they didn't have any particular relationship, I think. A little break in tradition, then. Sure. There were some people who weren't too happy about it, at the time. They changed their minds. Well, I sure hope so, since apparently even the Hokage can't get rid of the old guard so easily. He let the sentence hang in the air. There was plenty to say about some of the elders, but Indra was an outsider. Toru continued. Since we're already talking about ninja things, and the cage, let me show you the memorial. It's not so gloomy, promise. It is, though. I remember going there for Kurene's funeral. Indra just nodded. Very well. Lead the way, Toru. Ah, there's just a little something I need to do before I go. Do you mind? Not at all. Indra followed him, probably wondering where he was leading him. Do you like living in Konoha, Toru? Naruto asked. Toru paused. You know, I'm not exactly an expert at this diplomacy thing, but even I know that saying no is a bad move here. Naruto shrugged. That's true, but you seem like the type of person who'd prefer speaking openly. I'm not trying to fish for village secrets here. Call it curiosity. At least, that was the Toru he remembered. He actually took the time to think. Overall, I'd say yes. But that's a question that's hard to answer, anyway. If I were born in Iwa. Suna. Taki. Who's to say I wouldn't believe these places to be the best in the world, instead? Naruto nodded. He had thought the exact same thing. Still did, actually. Look, I know we live in a pretty, complicated era. I don't know if things were better in the past, well, before the whole clan wars thing, or even if they're going to get better in the future. Konoha is a good place, but it suffers from the same problems as every other village. Become strong or be at the mercy of the people who are. Exactly. Toru nodded, not surprised the man would get his point. He had felt some sort of kinship there. I don't know how civilians do it. It's more of a world problem than just a village one, though. Didn't want to be a ninja, then? Naruto asked. They had never actually talked about this, back then. Maybe there was something about him being a stranger to Toru that just encouraged the young man to talk. To be blunt. No, not really. I wanted to. Toru scratched his head. Nah, it's stupid. I come from a clan of ninja, and I had some talent. Anything that's not related to the shinobi arts becomes a hobby, at most. Naruto was curious, now. I didn't want to become a shinobi, either. What did you want to be? Toru stared at him with his only eye. Was he embarrassed? I wanted to be a comic artist. Really? Naruto blinked. Well, yeah. I used to love reading them as a kid, the foreign ones especially. Hot Water had some good stuff. He was looking away, now. I started drawing my own, too, but then my clan kinda made me focus more on shinobi stuff. There's nothing to be ashamed of. No. Of course not. I'm not. Toru tried. Not ashamed. It's just. I don't know. Feels weird saying it out loud. Yeah. Exactly that. I get that. Naruto thought. Did he ever mention his childhood ambition to Toru, in the past? Likely not. But Toru had told him now, so he felt it was fair to do the same. As for me, I learned how to use chakra when I was pretty young. You could say I fell in love at first sight. But people took notice, and I became a shinobi before I fully understood the implications. A pretty vague explanation, but a true one. Ah. Toru said quietly. I had a friend like this, back then. Maybe he had, then. He'd complain pretty often about some of the fucked up. Well. The more fucked up parts of being a shinobi. Of signing your life away when you were a kid. Killing people that may or may not have deserved it. Following orders you may not agree with. Corruption. I didn't always agree, back then. Toru's face turned dark. The more I grow up, the more I realize he had been right. Naruto still said nothing. He was pretty sure Toru was talking about him. Toru continued, a bit subdued. I think you guys would have gotten along pretty well. Man. This was going to be a bit harder than Naruto had thought. Why am I being so gloomy? This is not like me. Toru thought. There was something about this guy that made him open up a bit too easily. He had checked for a jutsu discreetly, the kind he himself would use, to no avail. That was all him. He tried to switch topics. Do you have any family, Indra? If Indra was surprised at the change in subject, he didn't let it show on his face. If you mean blood family. No, I don't. Not anymore. Toru winced. That was a risky question for a shinobi, maybe not his best move. Why didn't the Hokage wait for Shisui, instead? Indra noticed his discomfort. He chuckled. Sorry for putting it so bluntly. It's not so bad, now. It happened years ago, I never met my parents, and I don't think I have any direct family either. What about you? Toru grabbed onto the extended lifeline. Yeah, I do have a half-brother, we're very close. He glanced at Indra's face. His name is Uchiha Shisui, you might have heard of him. Indra seemed to think for a second. Nah, never heard of him. Really? Nothing about Shisui of the body flicker. Nope. Shisui the teleporter. Nah. Shisui of the Sharingan. Nuh-uh. He seemed amused. Toru was mostly confused. Where was the man coming from, exactly? It seemed as though everybody knew who Shisui was, usually. which came with its fair share of good and bad sides. Yeah. Okay. Maybe you heard about my cousins, then. What are their names? Uchiha Itachi. Nope. Uchiha Sasuke. Still no. Never heard of the Living Flame. Who's that? This Sasuke guy. Yeah. He's kinda making waves around the world right now. I mean, you're Orochimaru's apprentice, right? He's like, your counterpart. Ah. Nice, nice. Damn, man. Have you been living under a rock? Indra seemed to think. No, technically, it was above it. Ah. Toru started to laugh, punching the man in the shoulder. You're fucking with me. I'm too gullible, really. Indra kept his poker face on, but Toru saw his amusement. The blonde started speaking. Oh, but I heard of you, though. Oh yeah. Really? Toru cleared his voice, trying not to seem too eager. I mean. What did you hear? That you're an up-and-coming A-rank shinobi. Uchiha Toru, the Mirage Blade, I think it was. Toru rubbed his nose. He started nodding quickly. That's me. You use your blade as a focus to cast wide-area genjutsu, have been taught tracking by Heitake Kakashi, and use fire jutsu, too. Okay, how do you know this? I have my sources. It's kinda unfair that you know this much about me, while I know nothing about you, though. Indra shrugged. Should have done the research. Not that there was anything about him to find. Wanna go for a friendly spar? Toru asked. Indra snorted. As if. I'm not dumb enough to get into a fight with a Konoha ninja who can copy my techniques with a glance. On my first day here, on top of it. Naruto dodged under the flat side of the gleaming blade at the last second, striking Toru with a gale palm to the chest. Toru disappeared, fading into nothing but air and wisps of chakra. As he had expected. Naruto felt the Uchiha's chakra reappear on the edge of his awareness, and he put his left hand in the bird seal, focusing another wind jutsu. Wind style, crossblade. His chakra shaped the air into two razor-sharp blades that leaped toward Toru. None of the two were using their techniques to their fullest extent, as this was just a light spar. No one wanted to maim anyone. So apparently, yes. He was dumb enough. A few minutes of friendly ribbing from Toru and he had followed him to the training grounds, figuring that as long as he didn't use lightning style, he wouldn't get recognized. Still stupid. Toru got hit by the technique, falling backwards. Having drawn the first blood, Naruto was the winner of the match. Except he knew Toru better than this. The slight touch of Toru's chakra was hard to discern within his own network, but he knew what to look for. Also, he could feel Toru's chakra signature behind him. Ah. Also inside him. There. Around his optic nerve. He dispelled the illusion, kicking back and up in a spinning motion, and shrouded in wind. Toru managed to dodge again. At the top of his jump, Naruto made a kicking motion, sending yet another blade of wind toward him. Toru weaved three hand seals. Fire style, scatter flame. He unloaded a wide blast of fire in a cone. Naruto created a wind clone in the air, and both of them used the gale palm on each other's hand to get out of range, and back on the ground again. Naruto was about to dash in again, but then he felt it. Damn. Another illusion. It was a constant barrage of light, heavy, optical, auditory illusions. Any ninja who wasn't very familiar with the feeling of their own chakra would likely waste a ton more chakra dispelling illusions that were not even there. Toru was using that time to prepare another jutsu. Naruto was about to get a fire seal out of his pouch, when he felt another chakra enter the area. Hey! A girl's voice shouted. What are you doing on our dedicated training grounds? Uchiha. Toru. Again. Ah, shit. Toru mumbled. What? Naruto asked. I thought these were Uchiha grounds. He said accusingly. Ah. Toru said sheepishly. No, they're not. But the Hyuga rarely come here usually, really. What? The girl came into view, angry. She was not a girl, but a young woman, it turned out. Long brown hair, about their age, a swastika tattoo, a seal, not a tattoo, Naruto corrected on her forehead. White eyes with a hint of lilac. I come here every day. She raged. Hinata's little sister. Hanako, or something. Isn't she part of the main branch? He couldn't remember much about her. Sorry, Hyuga-san. Naruto started. I didn't know. He definitely did. She said, arms folded. Toru said nothing. I suggest you go before I warn my father. Suggesting he'd be less nice about it. Toru was already gone. Naruto gave her a short bow in apology, and left after him. Phew. She can be such a pain in the ass, this one. Toru laughed. So you did know she would come? Indra said. He was trying to hide it, but Toru could see the hint of a smile pulling at his lip. Yeah. Are you trying to get me in trouble, or is it just coincidence until now? Toru laughed again. It's a bit more complicated. Somebody has to pull her out of the funk she's in. At Indra's questioning look, Toru continued. She's my cousin's girlfriend's sister. Cousin's girlfriend's sister. Indra was trying to make sense of the convoluted phrasing. Itake, if I remember well. Toru snorted. Nah, Suzuki. Itake doesn't really bother with relationships. Anymore. Not after Izumi. Alright, then. The girl we just met. Hanabi. She used to be a real firecracker, before. Now it only comes out if you provoke her a bit. So I do, from time to time. Something happened, then. Indra said. Toru's face darkened. You could say that. Long story, though, and it's not my place to tell. Indra didn't question him any further. Ah, we're there. Toru said. They were on the way to the memorial, and had stopped at the place Toru had intended to go, before. Indra stiffened suddenly. I think I'm going to wait for you outside. He said. Sure thing. Toru replied easily. Maybe the man felt he was too macho for flowers? Nah, he seemed too thoughtful for that. Toru entered Yamanaka Flowers. Hey Ino. Chapter 42, A Really Good Friend. Just his luck. Out of all places in the village, why did they have to come here? Even when they had been children, Ino had occasionally helped her mother out in the shop. Things hadn't changed too much, apparently. Now that he was more attentive, he could feel the chakra he deduced was Ino's. Warm, bright, open, with an undercurrent of sadness and disillusion. Did something happen? Naruto waited outside the flower shop, arms folded, tapping his foot. He was feeling restless. He could hear Ino's voice inside. Toru joked around some, and she laughed. They continued to talk, and the conversation grew more subdued. They were probably finishing up, then. Good. All right, I'll leave it to you, then. Later. Ino said. Ah, Toru was coming out with flowers, now. Then Ino came out of the shop as well, carrying chrysanthemums. Naruto closed his eyes in consternation. They walked in silence. Not so much the comfortable kind, but closer to the sort you'd get when you put a few strangers in the waiting room. Toru considered breaking it. He took a breath, lifted a finger. Then decided against it. Indra had seemed to freeze up when Ino came out. She was acting a bit strange, too. Damn, it must have been love at first sight, then. He couldn't blame either, Ino was pretty hot. And he could grudgingly accept that Indra made him look pretty bland in comparison, what with being a handsome, muscle-bound giant. A great fighter, too. He hadn't expected that or his speed, considering his size. Now he hoped they could have a proper match soon. Thinking about it. Maybe meeting a guy would do Ino some good. Okay, time to play matchmaker, then. He wasn't the best wingman in town, the title belonging to Koji, surprisingly. Kiba could attest to it. Anybody who could make dog breath get an actual girlfriend likely had powers bordering on the supernatural. How did he do it? Ino spoke first. What is your name? Mine. Indra asked. Well, yes. I know Toru already. She rolled her eyes. I am Indra. He said simply. She frowned, a shadow passing over her eyes. Indra, huh? Like the sage's son from legend. Exactly like that, yes. That's a loaded name. I guess so. Indra shrugged. What's yours? Ino. Yamanaka Ino. Pleased to meet you, Indra-san. Pleasure's mine. Just call me Indra. Ino. Indra's here as an ambassador, of sorts. Toru added conspiratorially. Oh yeah, for which village, or city? Ino asked. His own. Toru said, as if this were a big secret. Indra gave him a flat look. Damn, didn't he get he was trying to help him out? What does Toru mean? Ino asked Indra directly. Indra pursed his lips. We built a village. Had a lot of help though. He added, seeing her surprised face. Orochimaru, from your village, is my teacher. He lives there, for the most part. Though I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say it out loud. Can you keep a secret? Ino smiled lightly. That's basically my job. Thank you. Indra bowed. UMI is a very recent village, so we're still recruiting heavily. UMI's the name? Toru asked. Yes. As in a village in the sea? Ino asked. Either this, or we just want people to believe that. It's still a hidden village, after all. Indra winked at her. Then he seemed to regret being so familiar with her already. Ino seemed to pick up on it. Oh, are you flirting with me, by any chance? She asked, somewhat amused. Indra recovered well, flashing her a childish grin. Absolutely. She snorted a laugh, blushing a bit despite herself. Toru approved. And what are you doing here, in Konoha, today? Ino asked. Or is it some super secret thing? Well, if it were. I don't think I should even admit it. But no, I had a message to deliver to your Hokage, from Orochimaru. I've only heard about that man in passing. What is he like? Indra snorted. He's a strange man, and a harsh teacher. I don't think he cares for morality too much, either. Must be a Sunin thing, then. Ino added, eyes dark. What do you mean? The other male one, Jiraiya, a friend's teacher, is frequently seen peeping on our hot springs. Ugh. What did you say to that? Ino nodded. I'm afraid of finding out what Tsunade-sama is like, at this point. She was my hero when I was a kid. Never meet your heroes. Indra quoted. He himself had definitely put Sarutobi on a pedestal. They continued to walk. Are you headed toward the memorial as well, then? Naruto asked, once they passed the gate. Chrysanthemums were for the dead, usually, so he had assumed so. Ino nodded. Yes. These are for my father. Naruto barely held back a gasp. Inoichi died. He had never been particularly close to the man, but he remembered him from all the yearly parties the Sarutobi clan used to host. A pleasant man, who also seemed to be very detached from most things, aside from his close friends and his family. I see. Naruto nodded. I'm sorry if this was insensitive. Ino shrugged, trying to sound casual. Her voice wobbled, if only a little. Don't be. He died more than a year ago, on a mission. We bring flowers to his grave pretty often. Naruto nodded. Shortly after, she bid them goodbye, splitting from them to go to her father's resting place. That had been very awkward. Naruto hoped that would be their only meeting. How were you even supposed to pretend to be complete strangers with people you had known for years? I have some flowers to leave, too. I will join you at the shrine right after. Toru said. Very well. He saw Toru head toward the area where he knew Kurane had been buried. In the distance, he could see some flowers had already been left there. They still come here, then. It was strange, coming back to the fourth shrine. He had already been there as a kid, with Sarutobi. At the time though, he hadn't known that the man had been his father. Or that Sarutobi actually knew that fact. He stared at the picture that had been set on the altar, unsure of how he felt, exactly. In the end, he settled for offering a prayer to his father, as well as a promise to the wind. He would do his best to allow his father's soul to rest, free from the Shinigami. He never found his mother's grave. Naruto had asked around. Instead, Uzumaki Kushina's name was apparently somewhere on the memorial stone. Strange. The first Hokage's wife had been buried with him if they actually buried the corpses, and did not just burn them, because that was hard to tell. And she had been Uzumaki as well. What had changed? Did Konoha want to let any remaining ties to Uzu slowly fade out, because of their role in their former allies being wiped out? It wouldn't surprise Naruto. And it only solidified his resolve to ask Sarutobi a few questions. About an hour later, Toru let out a long yawn. The sun was starting to set. Naruto took this as an opportunity to do a few things he wouldn't be able to do with him around. So you have the accommodation part sorted out already? Toru asked doubtfully. Naruto nodded once more. Yes. I found a nice inn that I already booked for the night. Thank you for your concern, Toru. He smiled. Ah. Well, okay then. If you're good. I am. Thank you for showing me around the village. Don't sweat it. Toru shrugged. Though if you really want to thank me, I'll find you in a couple days to finish our spar. Naruto hesitated. Well, I guess I'll still be here. Great. I'll find you then. Toru concluded. He left making a victory sign, his body flicker leaving a fading remnant behind him. Show off. Naruto continued to walk. Night in Konoha was still pretty pleasant. People walked along the streets, unhurried. The street lamps and the food stalls lit up the whole city. The air was full of smells, most of them pleasant. There was one thing he still had to do tonight. Even 5 years later, and despite not fully remembering all of the smaller streets, he found his way back to his old home, almost automatically. The only real difference was that he now had to sneak around to get in, since he didn't want to be seen around here. Luckily, it was a civilian neighborhood, so this was pretty easy. It looked close to the way it had when he had first bought it. Overgrown grass, a few damaged windows, likely no electricity or running water. No one had sold it or moved in. Whether this was because Sarutobi Naruto was reported as M.I.A. rather than killed or because there simply wasn't that much interest in it, when Konoha still had a ton of land available, he didn't know. Or maybe it was whatever protective seals he had cooked up at the time. Which, now that he had more practical experience, really seemed amateurish. Well, as they said, Miyagawa, one of the largest cities in ancient history, wasn't built in a day. Naruto slipped past his own defenses, feeling almost nostalgic once he was inside the bare-bones home. Damn, I really lived like this. It seemed like the kind of place a monk would stay in. White paint on most walls, no personal decorations of any sort. Old scrolls he could remember having been in the middle of reading around 5 years ago. The basement actually didn't smell musty at all, which he was very thankful for. He had enough memories of that for a lifetime. Now that he was alone in the privacy of his home, well, some missing/dead guy named Sarutobi Naruto, technically. He summoned 3 cage bunshin. They quickly set up a few more seals, soundproofing the rooms, and putting some rudimentary alarms. Then he went back to the basement. There, he placed a permanent thunder gate. He appeared in the middle of Umi's lake, in the stone circle. Naruto let out a long sigh. What a long day this had turned out to be. It was the middle of the night already. He had seen some light in the central hub, likely people gathering in the first bar that had opened in Umi. Despite the amount of trouble he'd probably get in the next months, what with being the official founder of it, he had no regrets. He had already come to consider this place home. With one body flicker, he crossed the lake, appearing next to their house. Karen was probably sleeping. It was probably better to let her think about yesterday's discussion, anyway. Then the door slammed open. Karen grinned at him. Hey there, stupid. He couldn't help but smile back. Hey there, dumbass. Did everything go well? Well, I'm here, alive and all. He laughed. Everything went well, yes. He grabbed her in a hug that she returned. They went inside, where they sat down. Naruto? She started hesitantly. Yes. I've thought a lot about what you told me yesterday. Oh. Okay. He turned a bit more serious. So. Silence stretched for a few seconds. I don't think this is going to work. Karen sighed. Naruto nodded. He hadn't expected anything in particular to happen. When he had told her that he'd be with her no matter what, he had meant it. He grinned at her. That's all right, Karen. More than enough for me. You're my best friend. No matter how sexy I think you are. She blushed a bit and gave him a very fond smile, her eyes crinkling. Friends, then. She held her hand. Friends. Always. He shook it. Then she tackled him, pushing both of them to the ground once more. She tried to get him in a body lock. Ah, you coward. Naruto laughed, then he stopped. She was sitting on top of him. He could smell her soap, and he felt her long red hair spool around his face. Her breath on his throat, her lips caressing his neck. Her chest pressed against his. Only now, he realized how little she was wearing tonight, her bare legs around him. And the way her flushed face gleamed under the moonlight that filtered in the house. Maybe this, keeping things platonic, thing was going to be harder than he had thought. You can give up already. She laughed, grabbing a hold of his wrists, her soft ass rubbing against his stomach. Never. He shot back, rolling from under her. Now, the roles were reversed. He held her own wrists together, pressed against the floorboards, with a single hand. He was on his knees, Karen in front of him, facing down, her legs still locked around his. Naruto was pretty sure his blood was not only pumping in between his ears, right now. He noticed Karen's curves. Her short shorts weren't hiding much, pale flesh peeking out from under them. He had never seen that she had tan lines before. He watched her ass bounce as she tried to free herself, mesmerized. What were they doing? She laughed. Is that the best you can do? Karen threw a mocking glance over her shoulder. You barely dash. Naruto couldn't resist. He gave her backside a firm slap. She let out a moan, as he stood there, watching her cheeks jiggle. Yield. He rasped out. Certainly not. She looked back at him, face red, her eyes half-lidded in pleasure. You're barely even trying. Karen bit her lip. God. You. I'm not giving up so easily. She said, her voice hoarse. She stuck her ass out even more, not bothering to look at him anymore. They shouldn't. He put both hands on her strong thighs. She definitely had gained some muscle over the last months. Karen panted. Naruto's hands slowly moved up along her legs. They slid under her shorts. Karen almost thrust her ass into his palms, breathlessly. He grabbed her thick ass, marveling at the shape of it, the way his fingers seemed to sink into her flesh. Naruto squeezed, his thumbs going around in circles. Karen was definitely not wearing anything under these shorts. His cock felt constrained by his pants. Remove them. Karen moaned, head thrown back. Which ones? He panted. Mine. Yours. Either. Both. He didn't have to be told twice. Karen's firm, soft ass was exposed. He let out a groan, feeling whatever was left of his rationality leave him. One of his thumbs rubbed around his best friend's cute asshole. More. She squirmed. Raise your hips for me. He managed. Karen obeyed, and he spread her legs, staring at her. She was already dripping. Inside. Your fingers. Please. Karen moaned. Naruto wasn't about to deny her. His fingers ran across her lips, sinking them shallowly in and out of her with a wet sound. She let out a long moan. Karen. He grunted. Yes. You had no intention of simply remaining friends, did you? She half laughed, half moaned. No. I just wanted to see if you meant what you said yesterday. About keeping things as they were. He snorted. How devious of you. You really are a good little shinobi, huh? Yeah. I guess I am. She moaned, feeling his fingers making a come-hither motion inside her. What did you really want? He grunted out. I think you know. She gave him a dirty smile that made his stomach flutter. What do you mean? He said, innocently. My fingers, then. No. Not enough. Karen groaned. Despite her words, she was still rubbing herself on his fingers. He continued to finger Karen, her pussy clasping around his digits. With the other hand, he caressed her mound, playing with her pubic hair red, too, he was sure. She was soaked. Every time she thrust her hips back, Naruto could hear squelching sounds. And she couldn't care less, apparently. Tell me what it is you want, then. Naruto said, his voice low. She let out a shuddering breath. Want you, inside me, Naruto. Please. She gasped. Your cock. That's it. Here. How he had waited so long, he couldn't tell. He lined himself with her quivering cunt, slowly sinking himself in, thumbing her asshole with his other hand. Karen was making a mess on the ground. She apparently didn't feel like waiting. She pushed back, moaning wantonly, as he filled her. Karen breathed. You're inside me. Finally. Naruto groaned as Karen moved her hips back and forth, her cunt clenching around his cock, warm and wet. Slow, shallow strokes at first. Then deeper, and deeper, until he could feel every ridge, every bump of her pussy. God, she was a natural at this. He was supposed to be the one with experience, not even that much, to be honest, but right now, she was driving him crazy. You're filling me, entirely. She panted. Karen. I love the way you feel. Only for you. She moaned. She was going to come, he felt it. Her thighs were shaking. Her walls tightened around him. Karen, I'm. He moaned. Me too. She whined in pleasure as she felt his cock clench. Need to, pull out. Don't. Karen grunted as he pounded her. Give it to me. They came at the same time. She spasmed as he filled her, holding on to her hips tightly. Karen. Naruto let out, staying inside her, feeling her pussy clench. Karen said nothing, lost in rapturous joy. He pulled himself out of her, leaving her cunt wide open, full of his cum and her own wetness. She was a sweaty mess, and still shaking. Naruto stood there, watching it, fascinated. Karen slowly started to come out of her trance, watching him with the most satisfied expression he had seen on her face. He gave her ass another slap. She yelped. Karen glared at him. You love my ass, don't you? Naruto grinned. And you love my cock, don't you? She grinned too, cheeks red. Sure thing. Karen turned around to face him. She finally removed her shirt, letting her tits fall free. Naruto could see her in her full naked glory. She was beautiful, dripping his cum down. Again. She half-ordered, a hungry gleam in her eyes. His cock sprang back to life. You're such a horny little thing, Karen. He grinned. It's your fault. She glared at him. Now, come fuck me again, Naruto. She said, with a small grin, and hooded eyes that told him that she definitely had felt the same tension he had over the last months. His cock twitched in approval. And I know you're the same. Karen scoffed. Maybe I am. Now. I have one question. Naruto paused, and she looked at him curiously. Friends? He asked her, extending his hand again. She let out a belly laugh. The best, even. Karen shook his hand. Chapter 43, The Divide. For the first time in a while, Naruto woke up somewhat late. Karen's head lay on his chest, still asleep. He really didn't feel like leaving the bed right now. He slowly woke Karen up. She really wasn't a morning person, tending to babble incoherently for her first moments awake. Nevertheless, she grinned once she realized what she was laying on. "I could get used to this," she said. "Same here," Naruto answered. "But I should get going. I'm still supposed to be in Konoha." "Are you in a real rush?" Karen asked, staring into his eyes. What she was asking for was pretty obvious. Naruto hesitated. "Aren't you supposed to be recovering?" She scoffed. "I'm good enough for this, in case you couldn't tell yesterday. A bit too late to join you in Konoha without raising suspicion, though." "Definitely," he deadpanned. "So? Leaving so soon?" Karen asked again. "Yes. But I'll be back tonight." "Good." He grinned at her, pulling her into a kiss. "Don't tease me, then," she said, cheeks red. Still, her smile reached her eyes. The council concluded their meeting in the tower. Danzo stayed. "I have stood still while Hiruzen's foolish optimism poisoned Konoha's well for decades," Danzo said. "I won't stand for this, too." Fugaku didn't bother hiding his distaste for the man. How many times had he wished he could simply replace him with Itaki and be done with it? Somebody that would take the actions Konoha needed from the shadows was needed, there was no doubt about it. Unfortunately, Danzo was the one most qualified to run the root program, as of yet. Itaka was rising through the ranks, but if Fugaku were entirely honest, he wasn't ready yet. There was still too much compassion in his heart. He could harden himself when needed, but he would still favor peace, which in the times they were living in might be too problematic a choice. "Orochimaru is one of my trusted ninja," Fugaku said simply. "If he puts his trust in this young man, I shall do the same. He is building up power for his own ambitions. How can you trust him, either of them to be loyal?" Danzo said, squinting his good eye. "There has been nothing holding Orochimaru to Konoha for years. He still holds this place dear and his loyalty is not in question." Fugaku closed his eyes. "He cares for its people, too, if in a pragmatic sort of way. Sarutobi has not been able to keep him in check for more than a decade. Tsunade is lost, drinking and gambling her life away. Jiraiya might be his only real link to the village, and while he is one of our greatest assets, he is almost never here." Fugaku said nothing. "And you think this will keep Orochimaru loyal?" Danzo spat. "I trust him." Fugaku glared at him. "When has he ever given us reason not to? He is a loose end." Danzo shot back. "One we can ill afford. I suggest we rein him in, or get rid of him altogether." "Are you suggesting killing one of our strongest ninja?" Fugaku's eyes were cold. "Out of fear." "Fear?" Danzo stared back. "This has nothing to do with fear. Indra is an unknown, one that you let loose in our village. He's being watched. Uchiha Toru is no Shisui." Danzo spat. "And he doesn't need to be." They stared at each other, antipathy obvious. "Orochimaru is a rabid dog. He will turn on us. I suspect he already is." Fugaku sighed. Danzo would not move, this much was obvious. "No. I consider this discussion over. You may leave." Danzo tightened his hand around his cane. "You must act now. I won't stand for it," he said, voice hard. "You won't stand for it." Fugaku's eyes turned red. "Do not overstep your bounds." Danzo glared at him. Fugaku continued. "Your fears, your constant paranoia are not pragmatism, Danzo. They would have us surrounded by enemies in no time, make no mistake." "And what would you know of it?" Danzo said, quietly. "An Uchiha." He spat the word as if it were a curse, showing his true feelings on the matter. "Corrupted by Hiruzen's foolish idea of keeping peace at any cost. Had I known how poor of a Hokage you'd be from the start, I would have opposed your nomination." Fugaku's patience had reached its limit for today. "There is a reason Lord Second picked Hiruzen to be Hokage, instead of you. Do not forget that," Fugaku said, tone hard. Danzo's eye widened. "For him, this was as close as he'd get to a true display of fury. And do not forget you had no choice in the matter of me becoming the Hokage. No matter how much you may hate me, or my clan, for that matter, as any fool would notice. Fugaku glared at him, before finishing. You are nothing more than a man who dwells in the shadows. Hiruzen knew it as well, and whatever else he saw in you, I cannot say. Do not presume you can interfere in matters beyond that. Danzo's face went entirely blank. Get out. Fugaku sighed. Both of them had lost their tempers, here. Danzo was Danzo, of course. But he expected better of himself. It was not the first time they fought, either. Danzo shot him a last unreadable glance before leaving through the door, his cane echoing in the empty hallway. Naruto appeared in his old basement. As far as he knew, Konoha's sensory unit focused more on the people coming in and out of the village by passing through the barrier they had set up in a dome around it. Hopefully, that would mean his entry hadn't been noticed, since he had teleported himself right in. Well, if they did, he'd have to give a few explanations he wasn't really looking forward to. He summoned a few clones, expending the least amount of chakra he could. All 20 of them disguised themselves. They would sneak out of the house over the next few hours. The summer festival would be starting in a few days, so they probably wouldn't be too noticeable. His only real goal in Konoha was finding the 4th safe house. For this, he'd need to cover a lot of ground. He likely had only a few days, the Hokage's invitation to stay being a temporary thing. So there he was, walking the Leaf streets alone, once more. Hours later, he hadn't made any progress. Naruto had searched for hours on end, with no real clue as to where he should go next. One by one, his clones faded out as well, until no more remained. The sun was setting, and there was a sweet floral scent in the air. Naruto was waiting by a bridge over water, one that was mostly out of view. He heard footsteps behind him. Naruto steeled himself. He set a short-range soundproof barrier. You know, old man. I was expecting you to show up a bit earlier. He said. Sarutobi Hiruzen spoke. I had trouble believing it was you at first. But your chakra, your true chakra. Biwako and I must be the only people in the world, aside from that masked man, to have felt it, before you disappeared. Naruto turned to face him. How you've grown, Naruto. Sarutobi said, his voice thick with emotion. And you've gotten much older. Sarutobi. Hiruzen sighed. This is not going to be a heartwarming family reunion, then. You got that right. Ever since Fugaku had told him about Orochimaru's latest project, Hiruzen had felt that things were about to change. Oh, there was a storm on the horizon already, and finally refined instincts told him that it wouldn't be long before a 4th Great War started. What he didn't expect was to see someone rise from the dead. 5 years. It had been more than 5 years already. He and Biwako had weathered the loss with the resigned acceptance that lifelong shinobi tended to develop. Those who managed to cope, at least. When people died, they took a lot of hopes, dreams, and love with them. Despite himself, and his reservations, he had started to put his faith in Naruto, back then. Konohamaru had been inconsolable, and Hiruzen had to focus on the living, so he had pushed his own grief aside to take care of his recently orphaned grandson. Years had gone by in the blink of an eye. And then, one day, Biwako had come to him, pale-faced, muttering something about having felt Naruto's chakra in Konoha. Not Sarutobi Naruto's, which was different in feeling and intensity, but the one he had been born with, as the son of Minato and Kushina. Touched by something otherworldly. He had to know for sure. But now, seeing him so strong and healthy brought all these feelings of loss back. He didn't look like the boy that had been raised in the Sarutobi compound. The face was too different, the hair long and blonde, too. The whiskers he had been born with were once again visible. And the purple eyes were a change. So was the height. He stood at a bit more than 1.90 m as neither Minato nor Kushina had been anywhere this tall, or broad. The gigantic chakra presence, dwarfing his own, reminded him of his own sensei. His confidence, his garments. This was Orochimaru's handiwork. Naruto was a young man, now. A strong one, at that. Hiruzen felt emotion well up inside him, again. It's good to see you alive and well. Hiruzen began. No thanks to you, Naruto said flatly. Your convoluted plans would have had me dead at 13. Hiruzen winced. Naruto continued. Hiruzen could see that he was seemingly calm. Now, is it the time where you tell me that everything you did was for my benefit, or for the benefit of the village? It might not seem so. The old man started. But everything I did was what I thought was the best choice, at the time. In hindsight, I have been wrong about many things. Naruto snorted. Oh? I thought this was the shinobi way. Lie, steal, kidnap, blackmail, kill. There's only one of them that doesn't apply to what you did. Naruto. He grimaced. And to some extent, I died for the village already. He shrugged. Well, considering that's what I signed for when I was, what? 6 years old? It was probably deserved, wasn't it? I gave my written consent, after all. Paid in blood. And even then, you pushed me, roped me into it, when all I wanted was to study in peace. Back when I was too blind to even realize it. But then again, that was your way of ensuring both the village and you accomplished their goals, wasn't it? A Jinchuriki loyal to you, and the village, by proxy. Hiruzen said nothing. Naruto interrupted him. I have one question for you. Well, several, but I find it very hard to recall what I wanted to say in the first place. He could understand that things could go haywire, no matter how prepared you were, when emotions got involved. What is it? Sarutobi asked, full of dread. Did you ever plan on telling me? About my parents. The real ones. Not the whore, not the drunk. Not the ones I cried for at night, while you and your wife played distant grandparents. Naruto gritted out. Hiruzen closed his eyes. At some point, he admitted. Once you were sure I was truly loyal, then. There was no denying that. He nodded once. Do you remember how the clan used to see me, before they found out I actually had some talent, some use? They felt I'd amount to nothing. Just like my father. It's not. I admired you. You used it to make me a willing servant to the village. What sort of loyalty do I owe them? Naruto continued. You're going to say you raised me, trained me? Naruto folded his arms. It is true, and I am grateful for it. But, you gave me the bare minimum. I was a child. I craved parents, the occasional hug. Some approval, from time to time. Not just a distant matron like Biwako's idea of parenting. Not just a grandpa who mostly interacted with me to train me. Naruto sighed, looking surprised that it had come out himself. Are you telling me that with all the power you had, you couldn't even find a single couple willing to take me in? Naruto asked. Or was there a more sinister reason for that? Did you need me to be grateful, loyal to you specifically? No answer came. That's what I thought. But never mind that. You did raise me. He admitted. I wished things had been different, but they weren't. Hiruzen nodded. I wish the same thing, too. And your feelings are valid. We have failed you, in this. They stared at each other in complete silence. I was never the greatest parent. Hiruzen admitted. He had been, and still was too much of a shinobi for that. There's a reason Asuma is rarely around. Biwako and I made all of you strong, but decades of being the leader of a shinobi village had definitely not helped. The greater good of the village always trumped personal feelings. I was better at raising soldiers than children. Yes. And that's what you did with me. Everything was made to make me consider only one possibility. Becoming a shinobi. Did you want me to become a stronger weapon? Like Gaara, or any other Jinchuriki? Naruto breathed out, before continuing. It's a perfect little loop you have here. Protect your friends. Your team. The people you care about. All of them just so happen to be shinobi too. Hiruzen said nothing. It was the truth, if put in the worst possible way. Naruto, being who he was, would have to become strong. His fate had been sealed at birth. Did you plan on telling me about the 9 tails sealed within me? Or did you plan to wait until I was eating out of your palm, as well? Naruto. Hiruzen said quietly. I understand your feelings, but... Naruto had to restrain himself, keeping his voice down. What about the fact that I would have had someone to actually take care of me? If you didn't let them all die. What about my mother's family? Hiruzen paled. Who told you? Orochimaru did. He sighed. Of course he would. Oh, don't get me wrong. I know you probably didn't do it out of pure cruelty. I think I know what you're going to tell me, even. That there was a war going on. You couldn't spare the troops, likely. Is that it? I had heard the rumors of forces gathering. Hiruzen admitted. I decided it wasn't enough. Uzu had defended itself for so long, it could likely manage. So when they asked for help formally, it was too late. And Whirlpool died because of you. I get it. But hey, at least, Konoha didn't waste any troops. Who cares about their allies of a half-century? Naruto shrugged. The short-term good of the village is more important. There's not a day that goes by where I don't feel regret over it. Hiruzen said, quietly. Doesn't look like it, considering what happened to the survivors, and how nothing is taught about it in Konoha. That's for the good of the village, huh? As always. I expect that. Naruto nodded. Ever the cage. If it's apologies you want, I will give them to you. Hiruzen bowed low, his head close to the ground. I did many terrible things, over the course of my life. As a cage, as a man. For all I did to you, the lies, the deceit, I apologize, Naruto. I am terribly sorry. Please get up, old man. Naruto said, looking directly in his eyes, a conflicted expression in his eyes. He didn't want to see this. I have forgiven you already. You did. I won't deny it, I'm still angry about it. Naruto gritted out. Scratch that. I'm furious about it, even after I had a long time to think it over. Hiruzen waited for him to continue. But you protected me, and you shielded me from some of the world's dangers. I lived to see another day. And I wasn't alone, in the end. I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't have met the people I did. I wouldn't have been able to get out of here if you hadn't taken the decisions you took, no matter how much I might hate it. Naruto bowed to him. And for this, I thank you. Naruto. Hiruzen said quietly. He probably looked like the frail old man he actually was. But for once, he didn't feel like taking part in any sort of verbal justing. I did not come here to lay blame. Naruto continued. What did you come here for, then? Naruto thought about it. There's something I'm looking for. He settled for this. From me. Answers, truth. Can you promise to answer honestly? He saw the old man hesitate. In the end, he let out a sigh and nodded. It was likely sentimentality. Yes. Ask me whatever it is you want to know. This is a matter of the utmost importance. More than just my own life is at stake here. It's about stopping Akatsuki, as well. Naruto said, his face tight, noticing Sarutobi's eyes narrow as well. The masked man with the Sharingan. Sarutobi asked, surprising him. Orochimaru mentioned him. If he really is the same man. He's very likely to be the one who's responsible for your parents' death, as he released the 9 tails. He claimed to be Uchiha Madara, but this could well be a lie, after all. Naruto said nothing, taking some time to think about it. He had been called Tobi, and that's how he saw him anyway. Madara or not. I see. He nodded. I never knew my parents, so it's hard for me to think about this clearly, but this changes nothing. Unless you have something more specific to tell me about him. We will take care of him anyway. That's a promise. Sarutobi nodded slowly. He had nothing more to tell, then. That's not your question, is it? He asked. No. Naruto's eyes turned hard. Where is the fourth safe house? He saw Sarutobi recoil. You know about it? How? It doesn't matter, right now. Will you answer? Sarutobi hesitated again. They've been destroyed. Both of them. Seeing Naruto's face darken, he continued. I have recovered anything we could salvage, including Minato's research and most of his scrolls. I see. Will you give them to me, then? Are you planning on harming Konoha? No. I want them to leave me alone, so that I can live my own life in peace. They might come after you anyway once they discover you are Minato's son. Sarutobi admitted. And I will tell them to fuck off, when the time comes. Respectfully. Naruto said, arms folded. I want nothing to do with Konoha. I have given my life for the village once, already. That's more than enough. It might not stop them if they find out. Hiruzen warned. Who's going to tell them? You. Sarutobi paused. He sighed. No. I won't tell. Fugaku knows about who you really are. He thinks you are dead, though. But he's a smart man, he might realize soon. That's another reason why I don't intend on staying here for long. Naruto shot back. Now. Will you give my father's legacy? The techniques Minato was studying were dangerous ones. It's yours, but the information within these scrolls. I don't care. What will you decide? Will you give them to me or not? Unbeknownst to them, there was a man listening in on them, his chakra entirely hidden, as they concluded their conversation. Sound didn't carry outside of their bubble, of course. But reading lips was something any spy worth its salt had mastered. There were a few things he would need to report to his true master. And he would have to feed a different version of it to the man who thought he worked for him. Chapter 44, The Gray Zone. Sarutobi had agreed to give Naruto what he had asked for. In 2 days, somebody he trusted would come to deliver the scrolls to him. In the meantime, he should keep a low profile. Once night had fallen, he sneaked away back to his home in UMI. Karen was sitting over the water. She noticed his expression. Difficult day? He let out a pained noise. You can say that, yes. He felt emotionally exhausted. Naruto told her everything. She just held his hand, nodding when it was appropriate. Once I get my father's scrolls, I'm out of this place. It feels too strange, being there. He said, starting at the lake. She squeezed his hand. I know. They sat in silence. He broke it. Is Sakura here already? Not yet, not. Should be a few more days, still. Karen answered. Why? Naruto paused. Want to come inside? She grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. They didn't get much sleep that night. Naruto only remembered he had promised to spar with Toru when the guy found him as he was eating lunch in a small shop. I was about to ask if you were ready, but considering how much food you ordered, it might be a while before you're good to go. Toru pointed at the 3 plates of food lined up in front of Naruto. Are you waiting for someone? Nah. I'm hungry, that's all. Man, that's worse than an Akimichi. I'm a growing boy. Are you? He was already gigantic. I think I might be done by now, actually. Naruto shrugged. Toru's stomach grumbled. All this food had reminded him he had not eaten yet. And I'll sit down with you, if you don't mind. Naruto laughed a bit, remembering the boy from his childhood. As long as you get your own food. They headed toward the training grounds, after that. Tell me, Toru. Indra started. Yup. He frowned. Are these Hyuga grounds? Toru looked at him in surprise. No. Why would they be? Indra pointed his finger toward the northeast. The same girl as last time is right behind this patch of trees. No way. You again. Hanabi screamed, flying through the trees. What are you doing on my team's grounds? Akman. Toru groaned. This time, he was actually innocent. Which she likely wouldn't believe, of course. Indra tried. Hyaga-san, I think this is an honest mistake. She glared at him. I don't even know who you are in the first place. He shrugged. I'm just here for a few days. Toru tried to jump on the opportunity. Yup. Exactly. Let us use the grounds today and then we'll be on our way. A vein throbbed on Hanabi's forehead. Damn. How could she be sweet Hinata's sister? She took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Why don't you go see your cousin, anyway? He should be almost there, at this hour, my sister tells me. Suzuki's back. Toru said, suddenly excited. Well, shit. Indra. Mind if we have our spar later? Actually, why don't you come with me? My cousin's a bit of a square, but maybe you'd get along. Toru vanished with a body flicker, breaking a branch. Behind him, Indra's face turned carefully blank, before he shrugged. He jumped after him. Hanabi screamed some obscenities after Toru. Uchiha Suzuki went through the village gates. Jiraiya was not with him at the moment. They had split just a few hours ago, the Sannin apparently going on ahead to Suna for negotiations. He let out a long sigh. It had been a 6-months-long mission, and he had missed home. Suzuki's eyes scanned the crowd. His Sharingan was on most of the time, by now, the Biju's chakra and healing preventing him from feeling any real strain. There. Hinata was waiting for him, with a dazzling smile. Suzuki-kun. Both of them being their respective clan leaders' children, things such as showing affection in public were supposed to be beneath them. Today, after 6 months away, Suzuki ignored all that, choosing to take her into his arms instead. She let out a cute little noise when he gave her a deep kiss, but reciprocated. Somebody whistled. Hearing that snapped him out of his trance. Standing on the rooftops were Toru, as well as a huge blonde man he knew he had never seen before. They both jumped down. Is this a bad moment? Toru asked, laughing. Suzuki sighed, with a fond smile. I didn't really expect anything else, honestly. Hinata laughed. Naruto met Suzuki for the first time in years. The first thing he noticed was how powerful, dense his chakra was. Toru was strong, and had chakra reserves that put most Uchihas to shame, including Shisui and Itachi, though that was according to him, so. Suzuki's dwarfed Toru's. And they were even larger than his own, which didn't happen all too often. His chakra had a strange quality to it, though. There was no real separation between his own, and the One-Tail's chakra. It wasn't entirely human, and it wasn't really a Biju's either. It stood somewhere in the middle, calm and furious at the same time, wind and fire. He had grown tall, and compared to when he had still been a child, there was no doubt about his own ability in his eyes. His was the look of a man who had proven his worth, his strength, to himself and the world. Toru seemed to still be struggling some with being compared to his own prodigious brother, from what little Naruto had gleaned. Suzuki, on the other hand, wasn't running after his brother's shadow anymore. It made Naruto happy. And to some degree, walking casually down the streets to the Hokage Tower, with Toru and Suzuki, as well as his fiancée, apparently felt like the old days. Of course, a part of him, more cynical, told him this wouldn't last. "UMI, then?" Hinata asked. "Yes. I'll be leaving in about 2 days." Indra confirmed. "I don't think I've ever heard of it before." "No offense meant, Indra." Suzuki thought aloud. "None taken. It's a new village." "Did you come here for business, then?" Suzuki asked. "Nah, not exactly. He came to copy our fancy fire jutsu." Toru grinned. "Aren't you guys the clan of copycats?" Toru pretended to look offended. "I would never dare." Hinata laughed softly. Suzuki grumbled something. "What did you say?" Indra asked. "We can't just copy techniques like this anymore. There was an incident a few years ago." Suzuki repeated. "Are you blushing?" Indra asked, squinting his eyes. "He really is." Toru grinned. "Something you did, then?" Indra continued. Sasuke didn't elaborate. Hinata did, instead. My clan and his had something of a rivalry going on. Even now, actually. Toru interjected. She nodded gracefully. This is true. So when Sasuke here copied and used some of our clan's most prized techniques against my cousin, in the Chunin exams, 5 years ago. He got into trouble with both clans. Toru laughed. Sasuke wisely said nothing, looking elsewhere. It took him years to muster the courage to announce that he and Hinata were dating. Sasuke groaned. Niji, her cousin, used to be insufferable after the exams. He'd have done his best to convince her father that I was about the worst person Hinata could choose. Not that he needed much convincing. My father is not that bad. Hinata defended. Sasuke just gave her a flat look. She looked away, amused. Indra asked. What happened to this Niji guy? Hinata stiffened. That's a story for another time, I believe. Sasuke said. A complete success, then? Fugaku asked. I would say so, father. Sasuke nodded. Fugaku chuckled. I didn't expect anything else from my son. This should appease tensions with IWA for the foreseeable future. You did well, Sasuke. Sasuke smiled. When he had been a child, he had always craved his father's approval, and in the last few years, he had gotten it. He didn't feel the same need for it, but it always felt good to be acknowledged. Thank you, father. You are dismissed. Will you be home for dinner? Mother's making katsudon. Itachi is here, too. There was a lot Fugaku needed to do and... Yes. I will be. Good. Sasuke smiled and left. Despite how familiar everything felt, when he was around his graduation class, things were entirely different. The fact that they wouldn't tell him about what happened with Niji exactly was a reminder that he was an outsider. Well, this would be over soon, anyway. Naruto was eating ramen in a small stall he could remember from his childhood. Tomorrow, he'd be free to leave. Mind if I sit here? Naruto heard someone ask. He almost choked on his noodles, when he picked her chakra up. Instead, he played it cool. Sure, go ahead, Ino. You remember my name, then? She asked, sitting on the stool next to his. You're easy to remember. So you are a flirt. Probably say this to every girl, don't you? Only on Tuesdays. She snorted. Never heard this one before. I like to think I came up with it, yes. Naruto deadpanned. Ino ordered some ramen, as well. Tell me. He started. What brings you here tonight? Oh. She smirked. So you're not all muscles and brawn. He gave her a flat look. Nah. I like to think I have a decent brain, too. Glad you noticed the huge muscles, though. That's definitely what they're here for. Ino laughed, almost punching his shoulder, before deciding against it, seemingly perplexed as to why she would in the first place. Naruto continued. Assuming you're not here to keep watch on me. Likely not interested in joining my village. He gave her a little smirk. Not here for my beautiful eyes either. Go on. She said. I'm sure you can figure it out. Trying to get some free food, definitely. She paused, blinking. Then a chuckle escaped her. Followed by another, until she's full on laughing. My God, you're such an ass. Thank you. I take it your awful sense of humor is why he's interested in you. Sarutobi? Yeah, we're just sharing bad jokes. Ino snorted. Right. I didn't expect you to be the person he'd send to me. Because I'm a woman. She said innocently. Naruto snorted. What does this even have to do with it? She shrugged. You'd never guess what some people believe. And you would. Well. I kinda am a mind reader. If you're so good. What am I thinking now? He asked. She rolled her eyes. With only eye contact, I can only skim surface thoughts. That should be enough. He grinned. She hesitated. Look, if you're going to show me something perverted, forget about it. It won't be, he assured. This is so stupid. Still, she stared into his eyes. Then, she abruptly stopped with a disgusted noise. God, my eyes. Whyyyy. She mimed, puking. What the hell is wrong with you? Naruto was laughing. This time, she punched his shoulder. I just wanted to try if it actually worked, that's all. He apologized. Ugh. Why Sarutobi, though? She groaned. Naruto just shrugged. First guy that came to mind. I don't think your mind is a place I want to be in. Shame. He let her start to eat. She started chuckling. Then she was laughing so hard she had to stop, and some people were noticing. See? You find it funny, too. He grinned. Ino was red-faced, trying to get the picture out of her head. Yeah. I guess. Might be worth erasing my own memories, though. Up to you. They resume eating, in comfortable silence. Tomorrow. She said, breaking it. Huh. Tomorrow, I'll get you the scrolls you requested from Sarutobi. Ah. Very well. Thank you, Ino. It's not really on me. I'm just the delivery woman. Still. She nodded graciously. The Hokage has to approve of their content, before anything, apparently. You're not smuggling anything illegal? Ino asked, eyeing him suspiciously. Sarutobi hadn't said anything like that before. Hopefully, this wouldn't be any trouble. Well, if it were. I wouldn't tell you, would I? He asked, staring into her eyes. Plus the Hokage is gonna take a look, anyway. I guess so. Well. In that case, I will meet you tomorrow. Any specific place? Ino nodded. Sure, let me tell you. Naruto went back to UMI that night. No matter how casual he tried to be about the whole being in Konoha thing, he was shaken. Seeing everybody was making him feel unbalanced. Sakura apparently wasn't here yet, either. Karen seemed to notice how he felt. They sparred until the middle of the night. Sleep didn't come easy, so instead of wasting time turning in bed, he started tinkering with a few ideas he had wanted to try out, but never found the time for. Including some that were a bit more abstract, such as emotion-driven barriers, which turned out to be a royal pain in the ass to even get started with. Karen, being the patient woman that she was, stayed up to help, until they both passed out. There would not be any wasting time, tomorrow. He'd get out of the village as soon as possible. Yamanaka Ino went to meet Sarutobi Hiruzen. Show this one to Fugaku, Ino. The third said, handing her a blue scroll. She bowed. I will, Sarutobi-sama. And this one. He added, handing her a purple one. This one, you shall give to Indra directly. Ino hesitated. This was a breach of protocol, she was pretty sure. Sarutobi looked her in the eye. I won't lie to you, Ino, as you have proven to be more apt at mind reading than anybody since Hisagi died. She took the compliment for what it was. The truth. Her own father had been better, when it came to disrupting, controlling, and destroying people's minds. But she had already surpassed him when it came to the softer side of things. Sometimes, she wondered if he'd be proud. Well, no. Knowing him, he would have been. But knowing it was not the same thing. She missed her father, his reassuring presence. Every day. And she knew her mother did, as well. But she was a shinobi, and her mother was strong. They would manage. The third continued. These scrolls need to reach Indra. Particularly the latter one. This could be about more than Konoha itself. What was all this about? And Ino. I have one question for you. Ask me anything. Did Indra harbor any ill will toward Konoha at all? Sarutobi asked, face unreadable. She wasn't surprised by the question at all. This sort of cursory skin was one of the reasons the Yamanaka were considered one of the most important clans in Konoha. And it was part of the reason she had been acting so casually with the man. That was not to say that she hadn't enjoyed the banter. I didn't do much more than skim his thoughts yesterday. She mused. But no. No, I don't think so. Or rather, if he does, it is not strong enough to reach the forefront of his mind. Sarutobi let out a long sigh. Good. That's very good. Thank you, Ino. I knew you were the right choice for this. I wish I could tell you more, but it would require more overt techniques, or him being asleep. I don't believe this will be needed. Sarutobi packed and lit his pipe with deft hands that betrayed his age. This is all I can ask of you. And of him. He muttered. Ino didn't ask anything. She wanted to, though. Sarutobi blew smoke. The Hokage would understand the need for this, but there are too many things at play here. Too many eyes, too. Secrecy is needed. You don't have to accept, though. Ino hesitated. In the end, her trust in Sarutobi won. I will make sure that they reach him. Ino stood in front of the Hokage. The blue scroll was open in front of him, his red eyes scanning over its content in a fraction of the time it would normally take for a person to read it. Despite herself, Ino felt guilty. She was deceiving someone who was, by all accounts, a fair man. I see. He said. Some of the contents are a bit on the dangerous side of things, but if Hiruzen trusts this Indra, I shall trust him too. Yes. She definitely felt guilty. You may deliver the scroll to him, Yamanaka-san. Yes. I shall do so, Hokage-sama. As she turned to leave, the Hokage took another sip of his tea, and he let out a choked cough soon after. Was he okay? She took a look at him. He motioned for her to go on. She left the room. The Hokage stood in front of his council, in the same room. Danzo, Koharu, Homura. As well as Nara Shikaku, Jonin commander. The IWA border situation is under control, then. Thanks to Suzuki. Koharu said. Fugaku nodded, not trusting his voice. Homura added. Now, with Jiraiya renegotiating trade agreements with Suna, we should likely be able to keep a tentative peace with them, as well. I don't trust Suna. Danzo spoke. Ever since they lost their unstable container, they've been pushing, prodding for compensation. Fugaku let out a cough. When all eyes turned upon him, he waved them off. Danzo glared at him, as if he had done it on purpose. Konoha is stronger than Suna. We should use this to our advantage. The old man continued. This would worsen relationships with Kiri. Shikaku began. Their alliance is a recent one, but it seems to hold strong. Kyumo would not mind crushing them, if it came to it. Danzo shot back. Cough. This was strange. Had he fallen ill? IWA would not stand by idly, if we just started asserting our power in such an overt way. They would fear being the next. Homura's voice rose a bit. And what can IWA do, with no strong ties to their allies? Danzo questioned. Konoha has never been as strong as it is today. Kyumo would follow our lead. Fugaku let out a rattling cough. Hokage-sama. Koharu asked. Blood. Huh. This was not good. He coughed again. And again. Call a medic. Now. Shikaku said, urgently. Was he looking that bad? He was feeling kinda weak. Another cough. More blood. Way more blood. His hands shook. He tried to call upon his Sharingan. More out of habit than anything else. He couldn't. The council members rushed to him, all of them. He just wanted them to give him some space. Fugaku couldn't breathe. He thought of his family. Of his friends. Those that were alive. Those that had died. His parents. Asahi. Setsuna. Saburo. Itaki. Suzuki. Maiko. Somebody call, someone. The Hokage was just murdered. Chapter 45, To Kill a Shadow. As soon as he was warned, the daimyo called an emergency meeting. It would take place the next day, and in the meantime, the news would have to be contained. To date, no Hokage had ever been assassinated in cold blood. The first had people trying, of course. the latest being a young man from Taki. All of them had failed. The second had died during the war, taking down some of Kumo's best and brightest with him, crippling its military. The third was the only living Hokage. Living proof that the job did not necessarily have to end up in death. The fourth had cemented his place in Konoha's legend as a bright, self-sacrificing hero who had taken a mythical monster down. And now, this. The fifth, a man who had tried his best to mend so many different bridges. Murdered in his own home. Nobody in the village knew about it yet, but the Uchiha clan had undoubtedly noticed their Hokage had not come home last night. What a fucking mess. Nara Shikaku sighed, echoing what most people in the room were thinking, even though formality meant they would not say it in present company. The daimyo sat alone on his side of the table. On his right side was his committee of advisors. On his left, the Konoha Council, as well as an Umbu representative and Nara Shikaku. Yuta and Koharu had an expression of distaste on her face, either resenting the bind they found themselves in, or the Nara's crude wording. Lord Daimyo. The situation is grim. With Fugaku dead, our enemies won't hesitate to take advantage of our momentary bout of weakness. Can we not simply ask Hiruzen to step back in? The daimyo asked, fanning his face. He has been doing a good job of things, hasn't he? Hiruzen was a great Hokage. Homura spoke, willing to concede as much. But his time has passed. Not because of his age, mind you, but because he has already stepped down twice. I fear asking him once more might lead Konoha to a worse situation than the one we're facing now. A reluctant leader is the last thing we need. I see. The daimyo said, nodding slowly. What about Jiraiya, or even Orochimaru? Danzo stood up. Jiraiya is one of our best field agents. But he is unfit to rule. His teachings, and by proxy, the third's teachings, are what led the fourth to die after putting personal feelings above the village's needs. Orochimaru. He paused. Once, he would have made a strong Hokage. This time, too, has passed. His loyalty is uncertain, and his personal ambitions might lead to him using the village as a stepping stone. He is not a viable candidate either. Shikaku frowned. I nominate Uchiha Shisui. Oh. The daimyo let out a surprised little noise. He is an interesting one, isn't he? I like him very much. Danzo squinted. Imbecile. He's strong. Well known and an upstanding man. One of the advisors said. He's too young. Danzo said. There is no doubt that in the future, he might be a worthy candidate, but he doesn't have the experience needed to lead us through the conflict that is coming our way. Praising him felt as though he had bitten something sour, but if this were what was needed, Danzo would not hesitate. Shikaku took a long look at him. He continued, Koharu nodding in approval. For the same reasons, as well as the fact that both of them are too soft, plagued by too much unneeded compassion. Hey, take Kakashi, and yes, even Uchiha Itachi are not viable options. These three are the best options we have, aside from the two Sannin. Shikaku argued. Not yet in their physical prime, leadership, strength and willingness. If their youth proves to be too much. Since Jiraiya-sama refused last time, Orochimaru-sama might be the best option. The daimyo, fickle as ever, seemed to be swayed by Shikaku. Besides, there's no one else dash. Let's hear Danzo finish, Shikaku. Homura interrupted. The sort of Hokage needed in such times is someone who can lead Konoha to come out victorious in the coming war. When the daimyo paused, he continued. Because a war is what is coming, I guarantee you this much. Fugaku might have tried to ignore it, but I won't stand here and hide the truth from all of you. A war, you say? The daimyo muttered. That is a pretty big thing to say. It is, indeed, Lord Daimyo. Homura nodded. But I fear Danzo might be right. Our enemies are growing stronger each day. It won't be long before the Tsunakiri coalition, and even IWA, too. Koharu finished. Oppose us more directly. Someone who has been through several wars already is our best option. Ah, so that's what they've been planning. Shikaku thought. Lord Daimyo he started. Let Danzo finish, Shikaku. The daimyo waved off. Who do you propose, then? To make Konoha even greater, and stay this way. Somebody who knows how to fight a real war is needed. Danzo paused. After living through two of them, I believe I am the best suited person. The Hokage should be me. That is not RW-, Shikaku contested. Yes. I have decided. The daimyo nodded, proud of his choice. No way. I name Danzo 6th Hokage. Danzo nodded gracefully, hiding his triumph. I thank you for your faith in me, Lord Daimyo. As my first act as Hokage, I will find justice for Fugaku. Danzo declared, once the daimyo was gone. Homura and Koharu nodded. Shikaku shot a hard look at Danzo. The daimyo was a fickle fool, as all five of them knew. But he was the most openly powerful man in the land. Now, Danzo was only second to him. It only took a few minutes for the village to take a sharp turn. What was he planning now? I have many men and women investigating his murder, as we speak. With the right tools, people and corpses can speak, even beyond the grave. Danzo said, his lone eye dark. To Shikaku. This meant nothing, since as Hokage, Danzo could have whoever he wanted sent to investigate. And he knew firsthand how devious Danzo could be. How did this happen in the first place? Shikaku asked. There are Umbu whose sole role is to prevent this. Where were they? They did their role, and they tasted his food, his drinks. Danzo said. They found nothing. Then, how? I have asked them already. Fugaku dismissed them at some point. That's the only window of opportunity the assassin had. Shikaku frowned. If only Inoichi were alive. Not only because he had been incredible at digging into dead people's brains. They had been teammates for decades, and he could use his friend's support. He would have to speak with Choza soon, too, despite the orders not to share the news. Are there any suspects? He asked, despite the thousands of other things he truly wanted to scream. Danzo nodded. As a matter of fact, yes. The poison that was used is a rare, immediate one. The Umbu in the room nodded. We found traces of it in Fugaku-sama's tea, and his body. The amount in the cup would have been more than enough to incapacitate and kill a man of his size. It inhibits brain functions, as well, and he probably didn't even realize what was happening. Danzo continued. Yesterday, according to his schedule, there was only one person who had access to the cup he drank. That would be the last person he met before all of us. As Shikaku can attest, Fugaku was already drinking from the cup when we arrived. Shikaku nodded. He had noticed the steaming cup when he had arrived, and had thought nothing of it, since Fugaku had his own habits. Tea was preferable to Hiruzen's tobacco, as far as keeping in fighting shape went, anyway. Well, until yesterday. Well. Danzo concluded. There is only one person that could have done it. We are interrogating her, as we speak. Her. Shikaku wondered. Yesterday. Yamanaka Ino. Come with us. The four Umbu said, cutting off any escape route. With you guys. She tried to laugh. I assume it's important, then. Had they somehow found out about the scrolls? Was this about something else? One of the Umbu restrained her. Ouch. Hey, knock it off. Shit. And she had not even managed to deliver either. On the other side of the village, the man named Indra waited. And waited. As a Yamanaka, Ino had tortured people. Pushed them until they broke. When it had been needed, she had killed them afterward. Any shinobi would understand this, no village was good. Shinobi could be heroes to some. And still, they would be monsters to others. From what she understood, the fifth had been assassinated, and she was the prime suspect. Which, she was sure, she'd feel terrible about this was Sasuke's dad, before anything, if she hadn't spent the last 20 hours being interrogated. Her stay in the holding cells was even more unpleasant than expected. Being subject to mind reading had been bad enough, but she had been trained against it, so this was not a first. One of the men was a Yamanaka, then. She had expected it to end here, since she had willingly let them access these specific memories, in the naive hope they would let her go once they realized she had nothing to do with it. It wasn't enough, apparently. There were things she had to keep hidden, the most recent one being the scrolls she had been tasked to deliver. Her refusal to give them complete access to her mind gave them enough reason to go on. In return, she told them nothing but the truth. That she had nothing to do with the assassination. They felt she was lying, withholding something important, or they simply didn't care. Either way, she wasn't going to talk. Which didn't mean she was going to enjoy the beatings, of course. If her hunch was right, and it probably was, as she knew Konoha's interrogation methods pretty well, by now they would likely bind her soon, and start suffocating her, see if physical torture would help. At the very least, it would lower, if not break her mental defenses. She would be in real trouble, then. Maybe Asuma-sensei, Shikamaru, Koji, or any of their families would be able to do something. Leveraging their political power might accomplish something, or it might not. Konoha wasn't fucking around, when it came to assassinations in their own village. Especially not a Kage. Whoever the new person in charge was, he wasn't taking any chances. Who was it likely to be? She would try to figure it out over the next few days. It would at least give her something to focus on, rather than the torture. A purpose was a decent way to keep your mind through tough times, her father had said. Once more, she wished he was still alive. Uchiha Sasuke marched toward the Hokage's desk room, tears rolling down his face. The Umbu in front of the door hesitated. One of them tried to grab his shoulder, but flames burned his hand, once he got too close. Let him through. A voice came from inside. Danzo. He thought, and it felt as though even his mind were distant from him. When Itake had come this morning, his face heavy with sorrow, to announce that their father had been murdered, their mother had fallen to the floor. Sasuke's first reaction, besides taking her in his arms, absently noting that Itake did as well. Well, his first reaction had been denial. Their father was one of the strongest, wisest men in the village. He was not supposed to die. Not now. They just had dinner, had laughed together, as the close family they were, the evening before. As he started walking to the tower, just a few hours later, he felt empty. There was an unbearable hole in his heart. With it came the realization that his father was just a mortal man, after all. Everything ended here. There would be no more happy memories to be made, no proud smiles to be seen. His father wouldn't take walks with his sons in the evenings, or have tea with his wife in the mornings. He wouldn't teach him anything, ever again. The tears started rolling. Uchiha, don't cry where others can see. Sasuke found he didn't care. But by the time he reached the tower, anger started burning. He knew his eyes had likely shifted in their most advanced form, from the scared looks the people he passed gave him. Now that he was standing in front of Danzo, a man that had hated his father even more than his father had hated him in turn. Not that his father ever said much about it, but knowing the man as well as he did, it was obvious. A man that had taken his father's position before his body was even laid to rest. A man who likely rejoiced from it, too. And a man who could even have been the one to orchestrate the whole thing in the first place, no matter how far out this seemed. Uchiha Sasuke. The imposter in the Hokage's hat, his father's hat, said. Instead of throwing accusations around, the way he really wanted to, he gritted out. What happened? Danzo closed his eyes, in what looked like mourning, determination, duty, anger, even to his Sharingan. If he were faking it, he was one of the best actors Sasuke had seen. It is exactly as you've heard. Your father, Uchiha Fugaku, has been assassinated. Who did it? Sasuke muttered. We have found traces of a rare poison within his bloodstream. And the same was found within the tea he had drunk. Danzo sighed. There is only one village that has the knowledge of how to prepare it. I said. Who? The demon inside him stirred some, reacting to his strong emotions. I am getting to it, Sasuke. Danzo allowed what sounded like sympathy to bleed in his tone. The poison is one that Suna has used to murder our people in the past. Suna? This makes no sense. Jiraiya-sensei is right there, as we speak. Negotiating. Danzo nodded. And one of our spies there confirmed that some of the highly controlled ingredients were stolen just a few days ago. Jiraiya is back on his way as we speak, and the agreements are cancelled. Entirely. There's no way. Sasuke breathed out. Do you expect me to believe this? That doesn't prove anything in regards to I didn't want to, either. Despite my distrust of Suna. And my complicated relationship with your father. He acknowledged with a wince. Sasuke glared at him. That was an understatement. I won't pretend we were good friends, but we shared love for this village, and we chose that it mattered more than our petty conflicts. And yesterday, the Umbu found proof that one of our own has been compromised. This person entered contact with a foreign agent that delivered the poison to her. Both are still in the village. A foreign agent. There was one person that immediately jumped to his mind. But there was no way that. We don't know how involved in the plot this person is yet, nor Suna's part in it, but one thing is for sure. Danzo continued. I had a neutral party review the suspect's memories. There is no doubt. The suspect is the one who killed the fifth, likely under a foreign village's orders. Danzo's next words seemed distant, as Sasuke tried to wrap his mind around the words he had just uttered. We are still trying to get her to break, but she has been too well trained. He sighed. I will get the answers out of her, anyway. No matter the cost. I will only believe something like this if there's proof. Where is this person? Sasuke gritted out. With his Sharingan, he could get to the truth. You'll be able to talk to her as soon as we're done with her. Danzo nodded. Prudence is good in a shinobi, Sasuke. And despite what you may think. I'm sorry about your father. His patience spent, Sasuke left the tower. To where, he was not sure himself. But anywhere would be better than facing Danzo right now. It wouldn't do to attack the new Hokage on the first day. Later that night, inside the tower, Danzo made plans for the future of Konoha. Chapter 46, The Underbelly. Naruto had been waiting for Ino for a while. Knowing Sarutobi as well as he did, the man had likely been telling the truth, when he had said that he was going to give him what he had asked for. Well, he hoped so, at least. Otherwise, things were going to become a bit more complicated. There was something happening in the village, something big. There had been a flurry of activity around the tower, with a few agitated chakra signatures coming in and out of it. Whatever Fugaku was doing, he wasn't sure. Nobody was allowed in the tower, according to what he had heard some people say. Not that he was about to get in there again. He'd have to stay in the village, in case Ino was planning on meeting him at night. But finely honed instincts told him something was off. So he created a shadow clone, who would sleep in an inn, while he hid himself in his old house. Another would walk through the village under a disguise, looking for more intel. That's how Naruto spent his night. Meditating. Waiting. The Uchiha clan waited too. Despite the terrible news not supposed to be out in the open, any clan member held in high esteem knew that the Hokage had been killed already. They would mourn silently for now, waiting for the time they could celebrate Uchiha Fugaku's life and times properly. And for the assassin to be revealed, so that they could get their revenge. In the meantime, several of the families gathered in quiet houses, sharing a meal in the company of the living. Fugaku's funeral would be a grandiose event. Uchiha were born in fire, and in the fire they departed. During the night, Naruto's clone pretended to sleep. What he was actually doing was extend his sensory abilities, waiting for Ino, or something to happen. In the middle of the night, this something happened, in the form of 4 masked men who entered his room silently. They were good, the clone figured. Even their chakra signatures were so dampened that he could barely notice them. If he truly had been sleeping, he wouldn't have noticed anything. Curious as to what their goal was, he let them apply several tags to his body with a feather's touch. His chakra was out of reach. Binding seals, then. If they had been a touch stronger, he might even have dispelled entirely. They bound him with a strong rope after that, to which he couldn't pretend to be asleep anymore. Hey! What the hell is this? Who are you? he shouted. To no effect, as they also had applied a seal that prevented him from speaking. And they covered his eyes, of course. Something was done to his smell and hearing, too. The masked men didn't bother answering his confusion. Instead, the strongest looking of the bunch threw him over his shoulder, leaving through the window. A kidnapping, then. If they didn't try to kill him, they likely needed him alive. Was this about Orochimaru? He wouldn't be too surprised if the man just so happened to have done a few things that warranted more attention from the village. Konoha had likely decided they wanted to torture him for whatever information they thought he had. Strangely enough, he was not particularly worried. The most obvious reason, of course, being that he was only a clone. Then there was the fact that he didn't intend to stay in Konoha for long. As long as he managed to get the scrolls from Ino, the rest including his relationship with the village did not matter. Finally, this was the exact kind of thing he had come to expect from a ninja village. What was next? Torture? Followed by a mind wipe to make him forget it had happened in the first place? He was almost curious. So he made a mental map of Konoha, and used chakra sensing still workable under restraints, if harder to figure out where they were bringing him. Under the cover of the night, they moved toward what Naruto knew was not Konoha's intelligence division. Were they playing some sort of waiting game? They had dumped him in a dark holding cell for the entire night, as well as the whole morning. There was somebody, in a remote room, yelling periodically. Even with his impaired hearing, he could hear as much. He could not reach far enough with his sensing ability to figure much more. Part of him wanted to dispel himself to warn the original, but he found out the hard way that he could not even do that much. Maybe if he bit his tongue hard enough. So he waited. In the meantime, he was focusing what chakra he could spare into the seals, learning their inner workings, and undoing them slowly. Sarutobi Hiruzen was smoking like a chimney. A bad habit of his, he knew, and one that both of his sons had picked up over time. One that got worse when his nerves were frazzled. It was something he had unfortunately gotten in the habit of doing back when he first became Hokage. His father, Sarutobi Sasuke, had been smoking for as long as he could remember. When he died, during the First Great War, Hiruzen had tried it out of curiosity, and wanting something to remember his father by. It had been a thoroughly unpleasant experience, so he had decided not to repeat it. The stress of the Hokage position made him change his tune quickly. And now, Fugaku was dead. He felt sorrow, for yet another Hokage he saw dying during his lifetime. It felt as though he had condemned him himself by offering him the position. Would he have been the one to die instead if he had chosen to step back up? Would things have been better? He had left this kind of politics behind, choosing not to take the spot he had earned himself on the council. He had made too many mistakes already. Whenever Fugaku had asked for his advice, he had come through. But that was where he had drawn the line. And now, Danzo was Hokage. Danzo, who had helped him as faithfully as Koharu or Homura did since the very beginning. Danzo, who despite his flaws, his fears. Because they were fears, Hiruzen knew his old friend as well as anyone could claim to. In spite of them, he loved and wanted to protect Konoha as much as Hiruzen himself did. Danzo, who had adopted an even more ruthless version of Tobirama-sensei's teachings. Danzo, who was more suited for the shadows than the light. And there stood the crux of the problem. At this point in time, Danzo and underhanded methods seemed to be the world's oldest friends. What would he do when he was in power? Hiruzen found that he was somewhat worried. Fugaku had been assassinated. And some part of Hiruzen, no matter how much he still trusted his friend, told him that if Danzo had believed this to be in Konoha's best interest, he wouldn't have thought twice before killing him, no matter the fact he was the Kage. That also meant he would blame someone, or something. As far as powerful ninja went, Fugaku had already been overtaken by both of his sons, as well as Shisui, of course. And that was no big deal. His leadership had been one focused on maintaining peace. And he had done pretty good on that. But through events that were not of his own doing, war was at their door. Danzo was right about that much. And as loath as Hiruzen was to admit it, Danzo was likely to be a better wartime Hokage. Even then, Hiruzen worried. He had learned about Fugaku's death from Itake, who was not supposed to tell him in the first place. The less people knew, the more time Konoha would have to prepare for the coming storm. He hadn't heard from Ino, or even Naruto. He hoped everything had gone smoothly. Ah, Naruto. His handling of the situation was something else weighing him down. Hiruzen took another puff of his pipe, thinking about and mourning for another younger man that he had led to his death. As far as being imprisoned went, this was a bit different from what he had expected, Naruto's clone thought. There was no torture, and whatever guards he could notice through sensing were doing a great job of ignoring him. He was making some progress with the limiters placed on him. The one on his sight was the first one to go. Which was not that helpful, considering he was still blindfolded. The amount of chakra he could access was a bit larger, though, which was the main reason he had taken the time to undo it. Which meant his chakra sensing ability told him something that he would need to investigate. Why? Because Ino was somewhere in here. Where exactly was hard to pinpoint, since he was still limited. Whether she was a friend or a foe, he did not know. She could be working with them, for all he knew. But she had the scrolls that might mean life or death to him. Naruto was not about to leave without them. Hopefully, this was not a setup by Sarutobi, either. He still had his hands bound behind him, but it was time to apply something Sarutobi had taught him, years ago. Kage Bunshin was based on several principles. One of them was the following. Even if you split up and disperse your chakra, as long as you keep even a little bit there, your original body can link itself and resonate with your clones. That's what Sarutobi had said, long ago. But if a link existed, that meant the clones could also communicate with the original, without necessarily having to dispel right away. Now, the clone focused on trying to find that link, trying to send a signal of some sort. The chakra pathway system transported chakra the way veins and arteries did for blood. The same way, every cell in the body was connected to this pathway. And that's the way the clone tried to see himself as a part of a whole. He let his awareness flow inwards. Unraveling along the thin thread that started from around his navel, he found the way through. He pulsed his intention through it. The second night Naruto spent in Konoha, the clone managed to reach through. During the day, he, the real Naruto, didn't even manage to feel Ino's chakra signature. Meeting the third was too risky, as even last time had been too visible. What was happening in the village? And there was one rumor that grew among some of the wary shinobi. That something had happened to the Hokage, and that was why nobody had been allowed inside the tower for the last 2 days. So when the clone he hadn't heard anything from finally sent him a signal, he knew it would likely be important. Ino. Naruto got out of the house, his chakra as compressed upon itself as he could make it. He disguised himself the old-fashioned way, using dye, braiding his hair, and putting on contact lenses he was keeping sealed inside his pouch. The clothes, he exchanged for nondescript black shinobi fatigues. His clone kept pulsing a low-intensity signal, and Naruto used it as a compass. There were more Umbu patrolling the village than usual, but it seemed none of them saw anything out of the ordinary as he walked around casually. The signal led pointed underground, apparently. It was a bit muddled up, once he got close, for some reason. The closest building that could fit the bill was one belonging to the Foundation, also called Root, a branch of Konoha's Black Ops that took care of operations the village didn't want to be out in the open. According to what Sarutobi had said, there had been talks about possibly getting rid of the program altogether at some point. It was a huge four-sided brick building, one that was not much higher than most tended to be in Konoha. Naruto guessed that Root was still active, then. The building held many chakra signatures. Around 20 decently strong ones, as well as something obscuring the underground levels. Whatever they were hiding must be important, then. He observed the layout and made preparations over the next hour. Root Umbukanda was standing guard with Hinoto that night. There were 3 different teams on watch, right now. One duo was on the first floor, one trio was guarding the only entrance to the underground level. The last duo theirs was keeping watch in front of the main gate. And there was a last man behind the locked door, in case something happened to the 2 in front of it. This man was the only person could open it, because the code changed every night. The rest of the Umbu inside the building were either resting or in charge of the cells, which was not much, in terms of pure effort. The building they were guarding was one used to hold prisoners temporarily, before they were transferred to the more secure route headquarters. Obviously, the building had no windows. The only way in was human error. Kanu. His teammate called. Kanu lifted his head toward the rooftop. Yo. Heitake Kakashi was crouching on the roof. Kanu felt somewhat nervous. Heitake was an Umbu legend, no matter if you were rude or not. Seemingly casual at all times. And yet, he was one of Konoha's greatest, most prolific killers. As far as he was concerned, Kanu preferred to stay wary. Kakashi pushed something forward. It fell to the street with a thud, and a grunt. I think you guys might have lost this one. This was some pretty shoddy seal work, so it's no wonder. Kakashi smiled. Is this, the man we brought in? Hinoto asked him. Kanu stayed silent. I made sure he wouldn't be able to escape this time. He's locked extra tight. Kakashi added, his eye deceptively lazy. Kanu knew that this was just something the Umbu captain used to disarm friends and foes alike. Was it a threat? Then Heitake winked and disappeared with a body flicker. The shape on the floor groaned in pain. He could barely move, likely from the fall, or the combination of seal bindings and wire that bound him. Kanu motioned for Jizo, the man behind the door, to ask for confirmation. He went to speak with the underground team. The underground team went to speak with the cell guards, who confirmed that the cell was empty. The man, Indra, had somehow managed to escape. Because this was undoubtedly the man they had captured the night before. How he had managed to slip out, with his chakra bound, Kanu didn't know. But Danzo-sama definitely wouldn't have been too happy about it. He and Hinoto picked the man up, and signaled for Jizo to open the door. Well, Kanu said, observing Kakashi's handiwork. There's no risk of him getting loose this time. These seals are very fine work. I guess we can't expect anything less from Heitake Kakashi. Indra grunted something. Hinoto kicked him in the ribs for good measure. He had almost cost them some very rough disciplining. They handed the prisoner to the underground team, who guided him to another cell, in case he had done something to the previous one during his escape. There, they would hold him until Danzo-sama decided what to make of the murderer's accomplice. Chapter 47, The Spider's Nest. He was to be the future clan leader. The eldest of 5 children, he grew up as a child of war. 3 of his brothers died before they even reached puberty, and so did several of his cousins. His mother's health declined as well, and soon, it's just him, his brother and their father. He promised himself he would become strong enough to protect them. In just a few years, he becomes the second most powerful man in the land. His enemies feared him. His allies, even what little family he had left, started to adulate him. But he knew he was no god. And that people that were put on a pedestal could fall from blinding heights. Still, despite his fearsome reputation, he dreamed of peace. But dreams were not enough. His father died soon after and he rose to take his mantle. And too early, way too early, his brother also joined their family in death. Something in him broke, never to be mended again. When a tentative peace settled over the land, brokered by the one man he could still find in him to trust. It was too late. Fear, anger, and hatred at the state of the world led to him trying to destroy the very same peace he had helped bring. It would not last, anyway. All he did after that, he did in the name of something intangible. He was Uchiha Madara, and he would make his ambition a reality. Naruto's real body was trapped, this time. He was also unsure if he had lost consciousness. Or if he were dreaming while awake. But there were more pressing matters. His hands and feet were shackled to the wall, his chakra bound. There was a guard who kept an eye on him. And they were obviously confident in their ability to restrain him. All in all, it looked pretty bad. Good. He had gotten in. As far as Naruto was concerned, this Umbu offshoot had started this fight. The seals he had willingly put on himself were based on the designs that the clone who had been captured had been able to relay. Standard chakra binding seals, Konoha style, sensory deprivation ones, also in their typical fashion. Easy enough for him to reproduce, as Konoha was the place he had learned from, after all. Steel wire to bind him, too. Of course, at this point, for him, it was pretty easy to slip in a failsafe into the designs, one triggered by his very own chakra. Now, imitating a man he had spent months around? That might well have been the easiest part. Pretend you're a man who tries his best not to get too close to people. Add in some internal conflict about the fact that you still wanted to get close to people. Pretend you don't. Pretend you're one of the strongest ninja in the village. Except now you may also want to pretend to be a lazy, detached asshole who didn't care about anything, really. You can. Good. Now have a shadow clone do just that, standing far enough to avoid too close scrutiny. There you go. You were in. Once Naruto felt that it would seem believable that he had fallen asleep, he reached inward. He unbound some of the limiters, as discreetly as he could. Then he kept his chakra compressed upon itself. More of the energy started flowing through his body again. Meaning he could use it outside of himself again. It was a smaller amount for sure, but it was refilling at a pace that was close to normal. Naruto almost let out a sigh of pleasure. But his chakra flowing outward again meant that he could use his sensing ability again. And he could finally confirm what he had felt. That was Ino, no doubt about it. He was not as good as Karen at figuring things out from a signature, so he could not tell much more, other than there was somebody else in the room she was in. The same questions that had gone through his clone's mind, the ones that he had discarded as something to worry about later, came back. Was she working with this Umbu Root division? It wasn't unheard of for Yamanaka to join Umbu, far from it. And there were many of them in the torture and interrogation force. Or, was she a prisoner, too? If she had been caught because of him. Well, there was no way he was going to leave her in here. He would figure out how to maintain his cover later. That was the way he did things when he could not afford to ignore his own heart, after all. And Ino had been his friend. The least he owed her was checking, no matter if it were more risky. He focused on his link with Sakura, summoning a thunder gate under his body, hoping it would not emit too much light. And he really hoped that nobody would jump in here right now. Then he summoned a short dagger, also under his body, his focus on avoiding the usual light show that came with the technique. He cut the wire that bound him, wrapping it around his wrist. There were 3 guards in the corridor. Too many. The room was closed off, the only way to see out of it being a small tinted window that was here to help the guards check on him. Leaving the prison would be easy enough. Focus on a gate. Jump. The guards could not be allowed to see it, of course, but he could find a way around that. But that's not what he was here for. His mind started working out possible solutions. If Ino was detained, get Ino out without killing anyone. If Ino was compromised, figure out how to get the scrolls. Get out without killing anyone. Sounded simple enough. Now, how the hell did he make this work? There was a tiny hole for air in the upper right corner of his cell, one that he had almost missed. If the guards were paying attention, and he knew they were, he would have to take care of the 3 of them at the same time. One way of doing that would be to suffocate them using wind style. The rooms were too big, though, and it would take him way too much time and energy to pull off. And he would likely suffocate himself and Ino at the same time. Lightning would be a safer bet, then. He'd have to find a way to deliver it to them. Naruto took a look at his right wrist, where the steel wire was currently wrapped. It was chakra conductive wire. Maybe. Just maybe this could work. Sakura had finally gotten to set a gateway close to Mist, after days on a boat. The land of water had been uneventful. A gray, drab place, for the most part, still reeling from a bloody regime. Some islands were said to be richer, but she didn't even get to see any of that. She came back to UMI, tired, boat sick. She still fared better than Naruto or Karen would have, and did she mention tired? Karen was there, trying to channel elemental chakra through a chain that extended from her left hand. All the while, she was reading through UMI's latest sales reports. She greeted her with the usual Karen grin. And a big hug, of course. "You're finally back, then. Yeah. This trip was a pain in the ass, and even more. I think I'm going to have a bath and then pass out. Right. There's some food left, if you're hungry. I worked something out for water temperature, it should be easy to adjust. You're a lifesaver, Karen. Sakura laughed, squeezing her shoulder as she passed her. I'm trying to figure a few things we can sell that won't come to bite us in the ass. Karen shrugged. I think we could work something out to adjust weather conditions in specific areas, actually. Sakura nodded. Can't help you much with that. She shrugged. Karen just smiled, going back to her book. Naruto tried something. Once he had run through a few ideas and was almost certain one of them would work, he released another limiter seal. Now, he had to be careful. If he expended too much chakra, any guard who was even remotely chakra sensitive might be able to feel it. Alright. He probably got the hang of it. Any time now. Yep. He closed his eyes, focusing on his link with Karen. Holding the wire in his right hand, he pictured golden bands in his mind. Naruto summoned them inside the wire, in a shapeless, in-between state. Physical, but not really. The material shifted, stretched, pushed. In his mind, he saw its shifting state as its normal. There were no bands. There was no wire. Both were molded into something in between, shifting and shifting as long as his chakra coursed through the structure. A thin line of chakra-conductive metal twisted like a serpent. Its length was way more than enough to do what he needed it for. He guided it through the air vent, slowly. Then he made it snake around the corridor, silently. The guards were unmoving, mostly. He used chakra sensing to estimate their positions, guiding the steel wire into a wide loop around them. They twisted a bit more, lifting off the ground. Just a little bit more. There. Now was the moment. He stopped holding his still limited chakra back. As he had expected, one of the guards' chakra expressed something that Naruto guessed to be surprise. Maybe fear? He squeezed in his mind, and the wire tightened around them, brittle, easy to break. He let lightning fly across its length, as strong as he could make it in his limited state. He heard 3 thuds. And then he felt fatigue cloud his mind. He lifted the remaining limiters. The other teams of guards would likely notice in less than a half hour. The fatigue abated. He summoned a blade, enhanced it with lightning until it started visibly falling apart, and cut a hole into the wall. Naruto stole the unconscious Root's clothing, mask included, and put the outfit on. He hid the 3 umbu, putting the limiters on them instead of himself, before binding them properly. By extending his chakra senses, he figured that Ino was the one being detained. Under his disguise, he walked to the end of the corridor and knocked on the heavy door in a specific pattern, for the guard to open the door. The only problem was that he didn't know this was the correct pattern, as he could only use what he had heard on the other floor. Apparently, that was the wrong one. The guard inside stiffened. Ah shit. He raised the alarm. Naruto sighed. He could not afford any more time. Wind. Lightning. He used wind to shape a vacuum blade around his hand, leaving enough room for lightning to enhance its cutting power even more. His hand bled, wounds opening all over it. The door barely slowed him down. And then he saw Ino. Later on, he would remember this as a pivotal moment, one that he would call the first spark, setting everything else in motion. Chapter 48, Jailbreak. As a kid, Naruto had been a fan of a wide range of books. Even after he had become a ninja, horror novels had been something that offered him a form of catharsis. Sarutobi had told him that people tended to gravitate toward the morbid when times were tough, during wars for example. Maybe as a way to hear about something even more terrible than their actual lives. Because they could simply put the books away. It gave them control. Ever the teacher, he had then explained that there were, in a way, only 3 different types of horror stories and myths. One was the kind that played on people's phobias. These were individual specific, like fear of spiders, or ghosts. They could even be political, psychological, or societal. It was the fear of the unnatural, as well. One example Sarutobi cited was the last village on Earth. There was the second type. Revulsion. A ripped-off leg being the only thing that remained of someone the story made you care about. The smell of a human burning alive. My time with Kyojou had been pretty gross, and Naruto had thought that being a ninja, he didn't need to read about people being stuffed into wells. There were enough opportunities for trauma already. Then there was the last one. Terror. Isolation, feeling trapped, or a simple lack of light. The unknown. The realization that something was very, very wrong, without being able to tell exactly how bad things were. Sarutobi had just given him a book about modern politics with a wink. It had been a fond memory, even though Naruto held conflicted feelings toward the old man by now. Today, or rather tonight, Naruto found out true horror, something that combined all three factors, was not something he cared to ever experience again. I know. This couldn't be. There was a guard in the room, who stood entirely frozen, despite his training. Naruto walked toward Ino's still body. From there, he could see that she was alive, at least. He didn't bother trying to keep himself grounded, since he was feeling so distant from himself right now that he might as well not have been there at all. Ino's face was pale, bruised purple, bloated, and bloody. Her eyes were blank, staring without seeing. His eyes went down. Her arm and leg tendons had been cut, and her fingers were broken. Likely so that she couldn't run, or use her jutsu. There were burn marks and black scabs on what skin he could see that was not already bruised. Her hair was still wet. Water torture, of course. Her chakra was weak, he could now see it. Weak, resigned, empty, helpless. That's how he could read her emotions. Her physical injuries were bad enough, career-ending for any ninja. Even if she had gotten out, she likely would never have been able to walk unassisted. He had thought Konoha to be above this sort of torture, somehow. That they had enough experts on the human mind to afford it. But thinking about it, this also meant that the mental part might have been even worse. And despite himself, he had wanted to hold on to the delusion that Konoha was a different place than the other villages. Not anymore. Not if this was the sort of things they did to their loyal ninja. To see Ino, who had been one of the most headstrong people he had ever met, be so despondent, hopeless. Naruto stared. What had they done to her? This was her own village. Were they so willing to turn on their own? And what for? He still couldn't tell. Ino had only been here for 2 days. Don't move a single inch. He called to the guard, stepping past him. The man didn't move. He crouched next to Ino, who raised her head slowly, to look at him. Her eyes looked vacant, but some of the usual lucidity returned. Took you guys long enough to go for genjutsu. She muttered, half to herself. Ino. It's me. Stupid. He might know her, but in the current circumstances, he might as well be a stranger to her. Yeah, sure. I noticed. She blinked, trying to understand what was happening, likely. It's not a trap. I promise. At this point, I don't care anymore. I have nothing to say to Danzo. Nothing he wants. Danzo? He knew the name from somewhere. I'm not working for him. She groaned, not believing it. Great. Free me, then. The guard protested, starting to say something. Naruto's eyes shut him right up. He broke her shackles, and removed the seals binding her. She looked at him with some surprise in her distrustful eyes. I'm not an imposter. He reassured her again. An imposter would say the same thing, though. Could be a long-winded trap. She muttered, trying to move her legs. She winced when she realized she wouldn't be able to stand. Naruto tried healing her, in the blunt and unrefined way that was the only way he knew. She let him do it, her eyes wet and distrustful, and her breathing wheezy. There were footsteps. That's as far as you go, tonight. Someone said. Naruto turned around. There were masked people in the room. Men, women. Some tall, some small. There was no way he'd be able to heal Ino with them here. Not that he was even sure he could do much in the first place. They needed to leave. To UMI. Unfortunately, the umbu in the room didn't seem as though they were sold on the idea. It was one of these moments where time seemed to slow down. As though the very colors faded away, only to leave behind a startling clarity. The sort of moment he had seen in his dreams already, where you could name a before and an after. It also felt as though someone were laughing. Naruto's heart was beating too loudly. The umbu drew their blades, all of them flat instead of pointed. "Out of my way," Naruto heard himself say, almost hissing. The umbu didn't move, and more rushed into the corridor. "Get out of my way," he repeated, his chakra surging. They moved into position, surrounding him and a shivering Ino. "Please," he almost begged. The root moved. Directive I, neutralize target. Naruto closed his eyes, in anticipation for what he knew he was about to do. "I'm sorry." "Nothing." "I'm sorry." "Nothing." "I'm sorry." "Something." For the first time in battle, he let his control over his warring chakra natures go entirely. The instincts of a natural killer were no longer held in check. The moon called. So did both sets of Raijin and Fujin seals. His chakra burned, begging to be released. So he did. Purple energy exploding around him. Wind and lightning, working together in complete harmony. Two blades appeared in his hands, wreathed in purple lightning, sharp winds that glinted with the same color distorting the air around them. He swept his left blade in a wide arc. The root ninja's Tonto didn't even slow his blade, and as he swung, he went right through him, with a terrible crackling sound. A second ninja was bisected, his guts leaking out, before he could even realize his teammate was dead. The others stepped back. This moment of hesitation cost them, because Naruto definitely didn't think twice this time. His right sword blurred through the air in a vertical arc, and one woman fell, in two pieces. Her organs littered the floor. Holding both of his swords up, he crossed them in front of him, before throwing them at neck level. While the twin blades flew, seemingly changing trajectories according to his will, another set of weapons was summoned in his hands, and he moved through the crowd after the flying swords, spinning, weaving, and tearing through people, armors, and walls alike. Blood flew, covering him and the room. The umbu didn't stand a chance. Somebody begged for mercy. He didn't listen. The lightning that tore through them also shielded him from most attacks, and his weapons cut through their armor. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, and no mercy to be seen, either. That time had passed. It was not the graceful, if deadly, dance of shinobi. It was a massacre. A few moments later, Naruto was the only person standing, his eyes glowing purple. He stepped through the fast-pooling blood, dispelling his weapons. The guard was dead too, his head laying somewhere away from his body, he noted absent-mindedly. There were other people jailed here. He probably didn't have the time to figure out who he should help or not. When he stepped close to Ino, she whimpered. Naruto recoiled, as though he had been stabbed. Was she afraid of him? He let the chakra fade away. More people were coming. He could feel them, even through the murky barrier that permeated the basement. Ino. She looked at him, unsure what to do, or think. "We need to go," he urged, as gently as he could, extending his hand again. "Somewhere safe. They will hunt you, and me, too," she whispered. This was. No, this had been her home. His eyes turned hard. "They will try. You can't stop them." Her head shook. "I will protect you." She hesitated again. "How can I trust you?" He closed his eyes. "I think you're going to have to. You already abandoned me once." His heart skipped a beat. "Ino. You knew." Looking into her eyes, there was no doubt. "Since when?" "From the very beginning," she muttered. "And even if I hadn't, you would have given yourself away, right now. Sarutobi's interest in you confirmed it." She just looked at him, at the people he had murdered. Unsure what to think of this man who might as well be a stranger. In her eyes, he must have seemed very different from the boy she knew. He decided. "Ino." He looked her in the eye. We will have all the time in the world to speak about it. Once we leave. You don't know what you're asking for. This would mean leaving my village. The one Dad died for. Naruto noticed she didn't include him, using my instead. And she was right. He wanted nothing to do with a village that would sacrifice their own so easily. My mother is still here. And my clan, too. My friends. I had hoped to find a way. She continued. I can't leave. They left you before. Some of the higher UPS intended to kill you, or use you as a bargaining chip. Ino closed her eyes. She knew this was the truth. Naruto continued. I don't think they would risk you revealing anything compromising. They would rather kill you. You're not safe here. Come with me. Please. Tears rolling down her face, she tried to grab his hand. Her hand felt so stiff, the tendons cut, that he had to grab her shoulder instead. He noticed, and his expression turned blank, hiding the raw fury lurking behind. Someone would pay for this. By the time the Root Umbu arrived, they were already gone. Naruto appeared in UMI, in the middle of the lake. One clone went to Orochimaru right away. He dashed toward Karin's signature, wreathed in the same purple energy. He noted that Sakura was back, too. He landed on the first floor's balcony, waking both Karin and Sakura. Help me heal her. Please. Karin took a look at the bloody Ino, snapped out of her stupor and pulled her sleeve back. Bite her. Naruto explained to her. Ino, looking even weaker in the light of the living room, did so without questioning him. At this point, whatever it was they intended to do to her, there was nothing she could do. Sakura looked as though she had 1,000 questions, but she knew the time to ask them would only come later. She went to get some pillows for her to lay on. Ino had definitely recognized them, too. What are you guys doing here? She rasped out. Ino. Hush. They need to focus. Sakura told her, caressing her hair. We will talk once this is done. Since when did you become so bossy, Forid? Ino laughed weakly. Ino. A tear rolled down Sakura's face. Ino was asleep in the room that belonged to Karin. The guilt of having killed so many people in a single night hadn't really reached him yet, it seemed. Orochimaru was sipping tea in their living room, looking all too casual for this kind of night. As always. I see. He said, lifting his steaming cup. So that's what happened. That's it. Naruto asked, arms folded. You know as well as I do what this means. As soon as tomorrow, I'm going to be Konoha's latest enemy. All of us. So? Orochimaru asked, lifting an eyebrow, and motioning for Karin to serve him more tea. I thought you wanted nothing more to do with the village. Naruto's teeth ground together. Unless that was just posturing, of course. My bad if I misunderstood. Orochimaru shrugged. No. Naruto managed. I meant what I said. But there's a drastic difference between on neutral ground, and what we have now. Don't I know this? Orochimaru drawled. I killed several of their men on my way out. Both Karin and Sakura shared a look. I kinda figured you went the lethal route when your clone came to find me covered in blood, yes. Is everything just a game to you? No. Orochimaru shook his head. But I knew the day would come where I wouldn't be in Konoha's good graces anymore. Everything is fleeting in this world, anyway. I messed up. This is on me. You saved your friend, didn't you? Orochimaru asked rhetorically. Besides, a Yamanaka is always welcome, if she's ready to work with us. You have people you care about in Konoha, don't you? Anko is here with me. He shrugged. Most of my friends are dead already, and that's the sad truth. Sarutobi and Jiraiya likely won't come after me directly if they can avoid it. They're sentimental like that. He chuckled. And Tsunade is, wherever she is. So no. The way things happened doesn't really worry me. He looked at Naruto's face, pretending to be thinking. It might make recruiting people from Konoha a bit more complicated, though. Naruto couldn't help it. He snorted, before breaking into nervous laughter. Karen was close to him, her hand near his. Now, Orochimaru continued. I know what's likely on your mind. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Being hunted? Something about being the strongest village's latest public enemy. Oh please. Orochimaru chuckled. That would be me. You're just my latest grunt. Disciple, I mean. Naruto didn't rise to the bait. Outwardly. I mean about the Yamanaka. Orochimaru sobered up, and Naruto followed. Inoichi's daughter, I assume. That's her. She could be useful. I might be able to heal her. Orochimaru dropped the bomb, as casual as ever. What? Naruto breathed out. I was Tsunade's teammate for decades, I picked up some knowledge, here and there. You might be a pretty, rough medic, but this is the kind of injury I can fix. Besides, you gave me enough of your cells for me to figure a few things out. I'm still pretty far from the answers I really want, though. Orochimaru shrugged, only somewhat frustrated. Naruto said nothing. You can see it as a reward to my ever-faithful apprentice. Orochimaru finished. Despite the terrible things that happened, that was very relieving. If Naruto's eyes seemed a little wet, nobody said anything. Oh? Did Anko do something? Naruto asked as innocently as he could, voice a bit rough. Orochimaru cackled. Very funny. I try. Now. Healing her might still take a bit of time. And. He turned serious. I will ask you to ensure she's loyal. If not to us, at least to you. She is in possession of some risky intel. Wiping a Yamanaka's memories might prove to be tricky. I will see what I can do. Naruto nodded. He would not agree to erasing Ino's memories, anyway. If she decides to join us. Orochimaru continued. She might prove to be a very useful ally. That's up to her. Never said it wasn't. He shrugged. You always do this. Naruto grunted in frustration. The day had been way too long. Keeping things vague, implying something else. Why don't you make simpler sentences? No double negations, for once. Make me. Orochimaru took another sip of tea. Not sleeping with me tonight? Your room is taken, isn't it? Naruto asked. Not that you have to, of course. Just curious. He amended himself. Karen looked surprised. Well. No. Ino is back. She stared at him. What does this have to do with anything? He wondered aloud. Well, I just assumed. Karen started. Assumed what? Don't make me spell it out loud. She groaned. But she looked both a bit sad and envious. Or at least that's what he thought it was. Please. She let out a long sigh. When she spoke again, she did not meet his eyes. Well. You and Ino always had something back then. Now that she's back. Ah. Now he got it. You assumed that as soon as I found somebody else, I'd get rid of you. He asked, unsure if he got it right. Well, you put it quite bluntly. She winced. But yes. Essentially. She shrugged, trying and failing to look casual. I understand, though. And I'd like us to remain friends. Then he did something that surprised him. He snorted. Karen glared at him. That's not really funny. No. You're right. It's not. He said. But you misunderstood me. What? Why? She asked, and he almost felt bad about seeing her look so hopeful and vulnerable. I meant what I said. I don't know what to call what we have. I thought it was just a really healthy friendship. Karen tried to joke. He laughed. It is, then. But whatever it is. This is not something I want to be temporary. At all. So. You mean? She started to smile. For sure. I want this for a long time. He really meant forever but didn't dare say it. If you're willing, I mean. You're free to go, or do anything you want, in the meantime. I know that you will find somebody at some point, somebody that could give you a proper commitment and dash. Oh, shut up, stupid. She laughed. Huh. I don't think I even want that. Karen replied. No? What do you want? Take a guess, stupid. She stared at him. Ah. Maybe he got it. Isn't this a bit too unconventional? Maybe I'm just kinda fucked up, who knows? She shrugged. He frowned. You're not fucked up because of Kusa, don't joke about that. Fact is, growing up there probably left me with a fair bit of trauma. That's kinda fucked up. Karen shrugged again. I know I am. That's Kusa for you. I don't mean you're fucked up. He groaned. I don't mind, either way. She laughed. And I don't mind whatever it is, or whoever it is you want to do. As long as there's a spot for good old Karen. She gave him a pointed look. Always. Although that does sound pretty strange. He admitted. You should be glad for the opportunity. She folded her arms, sniffing. Men have killed for less. They weren't me, though. You're a real Prince Charming, huh? Sure am. He retorted. I assume you just want a spot by my side for when I finally become the emperor of these beautiful islands. Oh? Will you be? She pretended to swoon. Well, once Orochimaru gets bored and fucks off to space, or wherever it is he's going to next. What if I do? Everybody knows it's the hot concubine who wields the power behind the scene. Not the foolish man that's being dragged around by his cock. She laughed. Take it back, you little shit. He jumped on her. Never. She grabbed his hair, mashing her lips against his. He grabbed her by her hips, pulling her onto his lap. They stayed like this. Thanks, Karen. He ended up saying. For being so great. She laughed. Yeah, I guess. You cheered me up. She shrugged. Somebody had to. Probably wasn't going to be Orochimaru. He chuckled. Besides. She added, switching back to another topic. Sakura is kinda hot, isn't she? She's definitely my type. I don't know what you mean. Aw, come on, I saw how you were looking at her on the boat. Must be an Uzumaki thing. Whatever happened on the boat, happened on the boat. That's where it stays. He looked away. Admit it. You scaredy cat. Did you call me a pussy? Nah. That would be misogynistic. But her eyes were bright. I'll show you a pussy. He grunted. Oh, please. Do so. She breathed out, in mock rapture. Little shit. Why did he have to be so attracted to her? He wondered, as he got rid of her pesky clothes. Chapter 49, The Latest Missing Ninja. In the end, the guild didn't take too long to catch up with Naruto. Waking up with Karen drooling on his chest, his first instinct is to bring her close. But whenever he looked at his hands, all he could see was blood. He had despised all the killing that went with being a shinobi. And now, as soon as he got angry enough, well, it turned out he was exactly as bad as other shinobi. There was no moral high ground to be had here. Realistically speaking, he knew nobody whose opinion he cared about would blame him. Orochimaru, Anko, and Sakura likely had high body counts already. Ino. Well, he couldn't pretend to know Ino at the moment. Karen wouldn't care too much, as long as he himself was fine with it. But he wasn't. All he could think about was how easy it had been to get rid of Konoha's Umbu. How much easier it had been than to use his bow staff in life or death battles, while being mindful of not crushing his foes' skulls. And worse. The fact that in the moment, he had been fine with the feeling of steel biting, cutting flesh. No. If he were honest, it was more than this. He had enjoyed it, even. The guilt only came much, much later, once his morals kicked in. How he wished he had someone, something to blame for it. The seals he had carved into his skin. Indra himself. The situation itself. His rage at seeing Ino. Deep down, though, Deep down, he wondered if maybe this was just who he really was. Another murderer. Sakura had planned to ask Naruto to help her with the mist thing. Seeing his pale face in the morning, she decided that maybe a bit of exercise could distract him some. He still had some pretty strong objections about killing, and as far as she knew, had killed a grand total of one person before yesterday night. He was probably feeling very conflicted, then. It showed, as even his control over lightning was a bit wonky, today. Sakura dodged under his spinning kick, hitting the back of his leg with a hand chop. She cartwheeled, wrapping her legs around his neck in a chokehold. I yield. He tapped out. Well. Damn, if you fight like this outside, you're in trouble. She said, quite bluntly. Naruto let out a sheepish sigh. Yeah. I know. You're shaken up. God damn, you're really laying into me today, huh? Somebody has to. Orochimaru won't give a shit about politeness, so better if we get this out of the way. Naruto winced. He knew the Sanin's blunt words would likely bruise either his ego or his feelings, as usual. Yeah. Don't sugarcoat it. He nodded. The way I see it, you won't always have a choice. You will have to kill people, no matter what you think about it. Ah. Thanks. I'm already feeling much better. Naruto snarked. Fuck off. She rolled her eyes. For most ninja, the first few kills lead to a road of introspection. Some continue being ninja, some try to find a way out. It's not an easy decision, either way. It's going to be messy sometimes, too, as what probably happened yesterday. She said, and Naruto looked away. Don't feel bad about it, I killed my first victim by slipping an explosive tag inside their shirt. They managed to survive the initial blast. It was bad. Body parts everywhere. Ugh. He winced. She shrugged. They were my target. Simple as that. I don't know them. Most of them were bad people. Some probably just had offended the wrong person. I don't know if they had a family, friends. And that's not really my problem. He knew this was something of a lie, because she did try her best not to kill people who didn't deserve it, usually. Still. That's too cold. He decided. There should still be room for some mercy, shouldn't it? Naruto. We're mercenaries. Been trained as such since we were kids. I know this, but still. And to tell you the truth. She winced. This is probably going to sound very nihilistic. Hit me. In times of peace, the value of life is just overestimated. He couldn't help himself. Careful with that edge, Sakura, you might cut yourself. Hey, I warned you this was going to sound goofy. She laughed. But we've trained to prepare for war, even though it sounded so remote back then. That's what we learned from the very beginning. The most efficient ways to kill people. Just because we're a bit better at thinking than most animals, not the animal clans, obviously doesn't mean our life has much more value. Have you been reading Orochimaru's philosophy books recently? She cackled. I'm serious, though. Why would I care about people who have no personal value to me? Or even somebody that I just met? With this kind of logic, I don't think we're going to see peace anytime soon. And I don't agree. Respectfully. Peace is something only somebody strong enough can decide. We've got the strongest village after you, now. I don't think you will be able to keep things as neutral as you wish. And Akatsuki, too. And Akatsuki too, at the very least. Sakura nodded. Who knows what Kyumo might decide? Any ideas on what to do? Kinda desperate over here. He sighed. You can prepare to conquer the entire world, I guess. She joked. Because you might just need to become that strong. Ah. Cool. Thanks. She punched his arm. The way I see it, you saved Ino's life and your own by doing what you did. So you saved 2 of my friends. I could have done it differently. I dash. And are you sure you could have protected both of you and gotten out safely? She asked, looking at him squarely. I don't know. Then you did the right thing. And it might sound weird, but I'm glad that you did. Thanks, Sakura. We have different opinions on the matter. But thanks. He rasped out. It had helped, some would. He would need more time to process it, though. Orochimaru dropped by, casually, a bit later. Here's yours, Naruto. Page 303. I'm on 210 myself. They update them so fast. He said, also leaving the pastries he had bought on the table. A bingo book. From Konoha. With a sinking feeling, Naruto opened it on page 210. A picture of his teacher's face, as well as his profile, lay in front of him. He looked terrifying in both pictures. Orochimaru. Age, 57. Rank, Jonin. Classification, S rank. Bounty, 150 million ryo. There was a description about his abilities, but this was nothing Naruto hadn't seen by himself, and a bit outdated, to boot. They really didn't get my best angle, the man declared. And not even a flea on sight to be seen. Anko's in here, too. S rank, by the way. She really is my best disciple. Naruto ignored him, and skipped to page 303, fingers shaking. There was no picture, only a decent sketch of his face. Indra. Age, 20. Rank, N/A. Classification, A rank, kill on sight. Bounty, 10 million ryo. Well, that confirmed it. He was wanted for being an accomplice in. What the fuck? He breathed out. Apparently, Fugaku died, yes. Orochimaru nodded. And you're wanted for helping your friend murder him. I'm as surprised as you are, truly. He sipped on his tea. His heart almost beating out of his chest, Naruto skipped to the end of the book. Yamanaka Ino. Age, 18. Rank, Jonin. Classification, A rank. Bounty, 50 million ryo. A mind reader, genjutsu specialist who had assassinated the previous Hokage? Naruto let out a groan, palming his face. He was almost certain that Ino had been framed for it. But yeah, this would complicate things a bit. Orochimaru served him a cup of tea, as well. He went back for a second spar with Sakura. Somehow, he had wrestled back some control over his chakra natures again. Rising Dragon. Naruto spun, in an anti-clockwise kick, sparks flying after him. Sakura focused her chakra in a makeshift shield over her arm, taking the brunt of the attack. She was in the air, now, where he had much more control. Wind style, whirlwind sweep. Naruto delivered a powerful horizontal sweep with his hand normally, he'd use a weapon, but this was a spar. The wind followed, aiming to throw Sakura off her trajectory, and straight to the ground. At the latest moment, she did something that took him by surprise entirely. What looked like a thin platform of water concentrated under her feet, in an intricate glyph. Sakura stepped on it, jumping a second time while she was airborne. What the fuck dash? She laughed as she fell on him. I think I win this one, too. Sakura said, once they hit the floor. Her hand was near his throat, which counted as a win. Losing twice in a day was pretty bad, by his standards, but he took it fairly graciously. He sat down in the sand, feeling wiped out from the morning sun. So. I'm a wanted man in the land of fire. He started. Konoha or the land of fire? Both, I guess. But Konoha for sure. I see. Sakura nodded. Sorry to hear that. Naruto snorted. You're awfully calm about this. Orochimaru, too, but that's a given. It's going to make going around a bit trickier. Maybe, yes. Sakura shrugged. Use disguises. They don't have anything about you, though. Good, I'd hate to have to wear disguises everywhere. Anything interesting? Ino's got a pretty high bounty. Naruto noted dully. 5 times mine, actually. Jealous much? Sakura snarked. She's in even more trouble than I am. Did she actually kill the man? What? Of course not. He thought. I mean, we can ask her, but I really doubt it, That's Ino. Sakura shrugged. I don't think so either, just asking. Disguises for both of you, it is, then. Orochimaru and Anko are both considered S-rank missing ninja, too. As expected, yeah. What are you, then? C-rank. She cackled. Fuck off, I'm worth at least an A rank, by now. Not this morning. He grumbled something rude before continuant. Did you know Orochimaru's actually 57? Huh. She didn't. Guess he moisturizes a lot. That or the lack of sun in the dungeons. She chuckled. Then she stood up, holding a hand out to him. Well, I see you're feeling better about yesterday's mass murder. He frowned at her. Too soon. Yeah. My bad. She didn't look really sorry, though. He sighed. Orochimaru really picked the wrong disciple. Absolutely. Ready to hit the Mist Islands. Will we be back for lunch? Don't feel like eating some semi-decent island soup. I guess we got a bit of time. The land of water was composed of many islands, that was no secret. Many were so small most mapmakers didn't bother with drawing them. The biggest one, the one the village of Mist was built on, was too secure for anyone to go through without the proper authorization. Most people didn't, and a fishing boat departing from the land of hot water definitely didn't qualify. The trade routes passed through a nearby island, where everything would be checked, double-checked, sometimes triple-checked for, well, anything. Yagura's paranoia wouldn't allow for anything else. Sakura had considered taking a smaller boat to Kiri, but decided against it. Tales of people who had tried to sneak their way in had dissuaded her. For the same reason that being warships, sentries, and archers ready to shoot down anything that wasn't going through the proper channels. Walking on the sea to cross wasn't a real option. Never mind the fact that the distance would be problematic on its own. So yeah, that's why we're here. Sakura explained. Do you think Mist itself is this, misty? I guess so. But then again, maybe they found a way to ward it off inside the village. They could barely see 10 meters in front of them. That's the most depressing place I've ever seen. He decided. Worse than the mountain's graveyard. I'd say so. Worse than the empty, bleak patch of sea we spent days in on the boat. Likely, yeah. Worse than your old house. Have a bit of respect for your oldest friend. That's Ino. Keep this up, and you're going to have to find a new second oldest. Technically, that would be the person that was the previous third. She snorted. You're pretty good at this logic thing. I'm a man of action. I feel. I don't bother complicating things with logic. So you don't think? Nah. That's good for nerds. He shrugged. Says the book rat. I read good books. Not just typical bad boy romance. He gave her a pointed look. She blushed. I was young, then. What about Under Night? I found it in the living room, and it sure as hell isn't Karen's. Shut your dirty mouth before I make you. Naruto made a silent sign. Sakura understood. They continued to bicker. The air whistled, and both Naruto and Sakura ducked under a pale gray thing that would likely have chopped their heads off. Thunder flashed, and a sword was in Naruto's hand. With his other, he threw twin daggers enhanced with lightning. Sakura put a mark on the floor, unseen. Then she shot a highly compressed stream of water where she could see a dark shadow in the mist. There are 5 of them. Naruto said, knowing she couldn't feel their signatures like he did. Mist ninja knew how to fight in the mist, obviously, relying more on their other senses. Sakura was at a big disadvantage here, he knew. He would have to attack, while she stayed on the defensive. They exploded in motion. Naruto's feet left a mark in the humid floor ground when he dashed forward, sword alight. One of the men revealed himself. Long brown hair worn in braids, mad eyes, and 2 dots on the forehead. He was thin. Ribs jutted out of his chest, under his loose pink yukata. Naruto's palm strike hit him head-on in the plexus. The lightning strike, at this intensity, would make most men lose consciousness. Apparently, this one was built differently. He gave a mad, bloodthirsty grin. Naruto met his eyes, then looked down. The man's ribs jutted out. Not just because he was thin, no. They actually went out of his chest, in haphazard spikes of razor-sharp bones. And right through Naruto's left hand. Naruto leaped back, already applying his messy healing technique to it. He motioned for Sakura to follow him, as he put some distance between them. Naruto knew exactly where they were, so this was not too tricky. What the hell is this? He muttered out. Sakura, be careful, one of these guys can use his bones as a weapon. She nodded, speaking in hushed tones. They're Kaguya, then. Some of them can pull their bones out. Anything to know. They're very durable, apparently. Their bones are hard to cut through, for almost all of them. It could be easier to knock them out. Blunt force? Lightning shock didn't work. Ah, that's bad. Maybe using it to cut through could work, then. The ones that came at me used earth release. Which was good against water. Naruto hesitated. I know what you think about it, but this might be a pretty bad matchup for me. Sakura said. I can grab them, but they're super heavy. And I can't get through their skulls with water jutsu, or my chakra blade. The mist was full of chakra here, which was almost suffocating to Naruto's senses. He wasn't sure where they were headed to, now. Naruto heard something. Naruto, jump. He did, avoiding a close brush with a heavy broadsword that cut right through a large tree, only stopping once it hit a second. A man appeared on top of it, wearing a long, nondescript black cloak. Bandages covered the lower half of his face, in something that reminded him of a rough-looking Kakashi. The eyebrowless eyes definitely looked more threatening, though. The Kaguya band came to a halt once they saw him. The man on top of the sword grinned. He was definitely expecting violence. Are they afraid? Naruto thought. Ah. Kaguya, huh? This sure brings me back. Mamakai Zabuza, is it? The Kaguya who had the ability to use his ribs as spikes stilled. They paused, the silence thick. Then the Kaguya men started grinning like loons, pulling weapons out. In the case of their obvious leader, his left wrist started shaking. A bone slid out of his elbow, and he pulled it out with a noise that made Naruto cringe. Zabuza grinned too. Come at me, then, Kaguya. Your thick skull will make for a fine drinking cup. The leader attacked with another of his men. The three others went for Naruto and Sakura. She had been weaving hand seals, knowing that shit would turn bad quick. The air was too full of water, Naruto had thought. It turned out that Sakura could make use of it. Some of the mist dissipated around their enemies. A sphere of water encased the thinner Kaguya clan member's head. She kept her hand up in the dog sign. Naruto understood that was how she maintained the sphere, so he would have to protect her in the meantime, to allow her to focus. He unsealed his bow, summoning two blades at once, that turned into arrows. He focused wind into one. Lightning in the other. Shooting two arrows at the same time was not something he bothered with, usually. He had learned it as a party trick, to be entirely honest. It would serve as a helpful diversion for Sakura to finish the guy off. He hoped for a non-lethal takedown, but it was not the time to wonder about these things. Both arrows flew, and one of them struck true. The lightning one, as Sakura had said. It went right through the smaller Kaguya's leg, leaving behind a large burn hole. The man groaned in pain. Neither of them halted their mad rush, rusty blades extended in front of them. Nothing short of death would stop this kind of bloodlust. His left hand was still too stiff for motions more precise than pulling the string of his bow. He would need to finish healing himself for anything more. Behind him, Sakura's eyes were closed in focus, a vein throbbing on her forehead. She summoned two more spheres of water, one around each man's head. They stumbled, but continued to move forward, aiming at Sakura instead. Naruto let his bow fall. Before it hit the ground, he was in the middle of the two men still standing. Lightning chakra coursed through both of his arms. He grabbed both of them by their necks, and with a grunt of exertion, he lifted them off the ground. It was messy. The electricity coursed through the water, amplified. He could hear their screams as they gurgled, looking for breath at the same time they were electrocuted. Naruto held on. So did Sakura. When he was sure they were unconscious, he let them go. Sakura held the spheres up. Sakura. I'm not taking any chances. They won't be able to do anything else. Can you say this for sure? What if they can? Sakura insisted. What if they attack people who can't stop them? This kind of bastard won't give a shit who they kill, as long as they get something out of it. Some traitorous part of Naruto wanted to argue that it was not so different from her. Some part of him knew she was right. Killing, raping, might as well be a pastime for this kind of person. He had felt their chakra, and their intentions. Truly, pacifism seemed to be the best way to get yourself killed in this world. What would it take to change this? Imposing your will? That kinda seemed to defeat the purpose. He watched on, feeling as though his morals were crumbling in front of him, as Sakura made sure to slit their throats. It was messy, and she had to press very hard to get through the bone. She didn't say anything about his reluctance to do it himself. Deep down, he thought that maybe actions made more sense than his. He was just a hypocrite, waiting for her to do the job. Naruto said nothing. Can we leave a mark here and go? Sakura asked. This is not exactly the fun trip I expected. No. It's too dangerous. If there are more of these Kagaya guys around, it's just asking for trouble. We'll come back at some point. Then we need to go deeper. Before the others come back here. He nodded, more than ready to leave. A head rolled in front of them. I didn't expect anything more than killing some easy targets, today. But it seems I lucked out. A rough voice called out. So, tell me. Where do you think you're going? Little Ninetails. Mamakai Zabuza asked, appearing out of the mist, his blade dripping blood. Naruto froze. Chapter 50, Remnants of the Bloody Mist. Nobody outside of a select few people was supposed to know about who Naruto was. And yet, this man, who he was certain he had never met, because how could you even forget that kind of monster? Something was wrong here. And not just the rolling mist, full of the man's chakra, that prevented him from seeing anything. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, instead of any of the thoughts that were currently warring inside his mind. Was he even a mist ninja? The man snorted. Oh, please. Spare me the bullshit. Sakura. He whispered. Got any way out? No. She muttered back. I set both portals down here during the last fight. Ah. There was no time to channel for 10 uninterrupted seconds. They'd likely have to fight, then. Is he alone? I can't sense anything in this mist. He replied. I think dash. Zabuza disappeared in the mist. From above. Watch out. Sakura screamed. Naruto rolled to the side, and managed to avoid being cleaved in two by the huge block of steel the man called a sword. How could she tell? Zabuza continued his onslaught, spinning his blade as though it weighed nothing. Sakura was somewhere close by, which would prevent him from using lightning style to turn the mist in a static trap, as he had originally planned. He summoned a sword, conducted lightning through it to parry Zabuza's sweeping strike. Naruto grunted. Zabuza's sword pushed him back some. Then he had to block an overhead blow. And another. And another. God. Was he trying to club him to death? Wasn't this guy supposed to be a swordsman or something? His blade was not holding up too well, even though it was enhanced by his chakra nature. Lightning was better suited for offense, in this case. He had to act. Lightning focused through his leg, and he delivered a sharp knee strike to the man's hip, hearing a satisfying crack. A hand made of chakra appeared out of the floor, trying to wrap itself around Zabuza's leg. The man stomped his foot, and water slapped both Naruto and Sakura's chakra hand away. While he was leaping backwards, Naruto summoned 3 daggers that he threw, once he was done channeling wind chakra in them. Zabuza ducked under them, weaving through hand seals quickly. Water style, raging pillars. Sakura was not the only one who could put the humid atmosphere to good use, apparently. 4 columns of water formed and rose around Naruto. He decided to stay in the middle of them, instead. Ah. Shit. That's the trap. He realized a bit too late. A fifth larger pillar of water exploded up from under him, shredding his clothing and lifting him up in the air. He stepped on the water, and pushed off, going through another column rather than risk getting shredded in the main one. Zabuza probably didn't expect that, from his surprised face. Naruto rushed him, with a diagonal wind slash that bisected him. Then Zabuza melted into water. Naruto dodged the falling sword by rolling to the left again. Before he could even regain his footing, Zabuza kicked at him. Naruto grabbed his foot, shocked him with a burst of unfocused lightning, before delivering a shallow sword slash across his torso. This one, too, melted into water. God damn. No wonder everybody hates fighting my clones. Zabuza tried to catch him with some water prison technique. Well, no. He did. And with his other hand, he readied himself to cut Naruto in two. Naruto gave him the most unimpressed look he could manage. Then he let lightning chakra flow through his body, at the maximum intensity he himself could tolerate in the water. Zabuza cursed, leaping back with an arm that seemed half-fried. Served him right. This should at least make it a bit harder for him to use water techniques. Hopefully. Maybe the man realized this, because he went right back into melee range, with an upward swing. Naruto summoned a new blade, the previous one having been damaged by the butcher's blade smashing into it repeatedly. He parried Zabuza's blade. With his other hand, he grabbed onto the dull side of the sword, holding it into place. He was stronger physically than the man. Zabuza grunted. He couldn't channel water through his sword because he'd fry himself, as he had finally noticed. Sakura appeared from nowhere, eyes cold, a chakra blade already formed around her fingers, aimed at Zabuza's neck. He had to let go of his sword to dodge, and Sakura's blade ripped through some of the bandages he had around his face instead of his throat. Zabuza kicked at Sakura's ribs, and Naruto winced as she flew away. He wasn't about to let the man hide in the mist again. Naruto weaved several hand signs, before slapping his hand on the floor. Wind style, path clearer. A dome of chakra built around him, before expanding in every direction, clearing the mist away. He could see Zabuza clearly, and Sakura too, who was wincing. Maybe the kick had broken a rib, then. There was no way he was allowing the man to recover this blade. He dug for a sealing scroll, and proceeded to store the sword in it. He wouldn't use it himself, of course, but it removed a dangerous variable from the fight. Ah. Maybe that had not been the best thing to do. The man looked downright furious. The sharp teeth really brought out his angry eyes, Naruto mused. Give it back. He grunted. Ah, come on, this is just a fucking sword. He complained. Get another one. Zabuza held the dog sign in answer. The mist returned, thicker than before, and even wind jutsu only chased it away for a few instants. The humidity was too much, and Zabuza was likely not expending much chakra to keep the mist up. Naruto created 4 clones, and each of them left in different directions. One of them was dispelled almost instantly, allowing Naruto to pinpoint Zabuza's position. He and the rest of his clones rushed there. Apparently, Zabuza wouldn't fall for this kind of straightforward trick, because he was already gone by the time Naruto got there. Or maybe he was also good with ranged weapons, as well. He couldn't sense him anywhere close anymore, so he ran toward the last place he had seen Sakura. Damn, but he really hated fighting blind. And he had never been as good with long-distance jutsu as he was with close range. Maybe he'd have to do something about that. It was not the first time he experienced something just like this. Not that it would be really useful now, with Sakura so close by. Naruto ran for what felt like hours, when he knew it had not even been minutes. The mist seemed never-ending. At least, he knew Sakura would likely be safe, since she apparently could feel when Zabuza was close. And she had her portals, too. Another of his clones got attacked, this time in melee range, and Zabuza got slashed across the chest by a blade made out of water for his troubles. Sakura, then. He and his clones headed there. One of the clones started using wind chakra, drawing Zabuza's attention away. Naruto picked a limping Sakura up. There was a shift in the mist, and she opened a portal right under them, shifting them in space. They reappeared further away, in a place where the mist was just a bit lighter. "Can we just leave?" Sakura asked. "I think he's going to notice and stop us before we manage to finish the jump. His mist might help him sense chakra building up, so he wouldn't try it this close." Sakura was exhausted, Naruto noticed. There was no way she would be able to fight on for much longer. He started healing her, keeping his chakra output as low as he could, in case Zabuza could find them this way. His remaining clones dispelled, hit by something unseen. That was weird. As far as he knew, Zabuza was not this fast. "I guess I will take Kubikurabako off your corpse, then." The mist echoed. "The fuck is a Kubikurabako in the first place?" Naruto whispered. Zabuza was trying to find them, by goading them into talking. "The sword. It's one of Mist's legendary swords." Sakura answered. "This big butcher knife? Is there even anything peculiar about it?" Naruto snorted. Even then, he was focusing on healing her. "I'm not sure." She whispered back. "Thanks for the healing." Sakura nodded in gratitude. "Ah, come on. This is nothing." He mumbled back. "You'd do the same for me. Except I don't know shit about this. I'm better at killing, anyway," she said, amused. He said nothing. "Can you stand?" Naruto asked. "Yeah. Some would. Fighting might still be a bit difficult, though." "Escape, then. I think it's for the best." She nodded. Zabuza's voice echoed in the mist again, and they both ignored it. "He's close," Sakura said. "How can you tell?" She chuckled. She didn't seem really amused, though. "He's spreading his own water chakra in the air to keep the mist so dense. I don't need to be a sensor to notice the difference in feeling. Wherever the mist is too off for me to use. That's where he is." Naruto nodded. "Ready to go?" he mouthed. She nodded too. Zabuza appeared. Sakura released a high-pressure water stream from her mouth, twisting her head around, and forcing him to dodge. Naruto's subsequent wind cutter did more to temporarily lift the mist than anything else. He noticed that Zabuza was now using a regular long sword, that he must have gotten out at some point when Naruto couldn't see him. Zabuza came to a halt. The Kaguya band's leader leaped out of the mist, bone sword in hand, flying after Zabuza. "Die, die, die!" he screamed, jubilant. "You're way worse at this than Kimimaro. Come on, then." Zabuza shot back. They clashed swords, both of them grinning with sharp teeth, as though this were just a spar. "These mist guys really have a fucking problem," Naruto said. "Let's go. Now." Sakura nodded at him. "You're faster than I am, right?" Naruto nodded. "Got it." He picked her up, bridal style, and dashed off, while Zabuza and the other man were both distracted. In one leap, he covered as much distance as he could with Sakura in his arms. The wind rushed to their ears. Naruto heard Zabuza shout something. He was almost out of the mist. Something hit him in his side, at full speed. He barely managed to shield Sakura from the fall. "What was that?" Naruto grunted, slowly standing up from the ground. Sakura groaned, trying to sit up. She couldn't recover as quickly as he usually did. "How did they manage to attack us through the chakra mist?" Naruto wondered. The only way he could manage to even navigate in the chakra-dense parts of it was his sense of hearing, which he was not so good with. There was someone standing in front of them, in a yukata. Man, woman, Sakura couldn't say for sure. Their face was hidden entirely behind a white mask, and they had long, black hair worn loose. A man, most likely. They were a bit too tall, and the shoulders a bit too broad. How many more surprises did this day have for them in reserve? She was a bit out of it, by now. Her stamina had never been the greatest, so extended battle against strong ninja was the exact kind of situation she tended to avoid. Using portals for offense was a double-edged sword. If it succeeded, she had a good chance of ending a battle in one single move, using the effect of surprise. If she missed her chance, well, in that case, she didn't have any way to escape anymore. She knew herself to be decently strong, but that was it, to her. Monsters like Naruto aside, and even Karen, to a lesser degree, it was highly abnormal to rise to elite Jonin level in such a short amount of time. Zabuza, on his own, they could likely manage just fine. Naruto could even pull a win off by himself, she thought. But two people at around this level. When she was already on the ropes. Fuck no. This kind of shinobi were the kind of monsters you needed to be wary of. You knew it when you saw them. You knew it when you saw them. You knew it when you felt them. They simply filled the space wherever they went. When they fought, you didn't really bother drawing comparisons to usual shinobi battles. These were the outliers. The kind that would kill you with a single look, follow you around the world with a single touch. Cripple your body or mind before you even noticed anything was wrong. The cage were some of these people. Orochimaru was one of them. Anko, despite her casual manner, was one of them. Naruto was getting there. Zabuza was one of them. This guy likely was, too. Sakura was feeling hopelessly outclassed here. What could she even do? She felt again like the little girl, daughter to two very average shinobi, doing her best to keep up with the clan kids. All right. If it's a fight you want. Bring it, asshole. Naruto shouted, thunder shifting into a sword in his hand. Sakura stifled a laugh. What was she doing, moping around? They had a fight to win. Okay. Maybe that had been easier said than done. They were lucky Zabuza was busy with the lunatic, because this masked ninja was a real pain in the ass to fight. He could seemingly locate her as though there was no mist at all, and he threw his weapon with deadly accuracy. He was at least as good with water jutsu as she was, and he could counter any of her moves. The masked man was not getting in close range, either, satisfied to keep them away from himself. Was he afraid of getting up close and personal, or? She had the hunch he was leading them somewhere. Likely to Zabuza, or another ally. Naruto? She whispered. Yeah. He asked, looking around in the mist for any sign of the man. I think he might be trying to trap us. Ah. He nodded. I was wondering. It seems as though we're going toward the southwest, more and more. Yes. No matter why that is, we should probably avoid doing that. Unless he's trying to make us do exactly that. He was somewhat obvious about it. Naruto countered. Sakura hesitated. He might be trying to goad me into fighting him in melee range, too. Naruto continued. Unfortunately, that's what I'm best at, anyway. He shrugged. So, let's go in. She asked, and he nodded. I'll run straight at him, cover me. Sakura finished. The reverse combination might be more dangerous to both of them. Plus they had mostly practiced it this way. Blue lightning covered his legs and arms. A pair of swords appeared in his hands. Sakura dashed forward, headed straight to where the man had last been. Soon enough, a volley of kunai flew at her, from a spot that was more to her right than she had expected. She grunted, her spectral hand blinking into existence, and she used it to grab a tree branch to propel her up and forward even faster. She was almost flying, by now. She threw her chakra hand forward. More weapons came at her, wreathed in a watery serrated edge. It was not something she had really seen before, but she would remember this. They came at her too fast for her to dodge, aimed at her face. She ignored them, continuing to extend her spectral hand, trying to grab the man. He dodged, moving as little as he needed to. The thrown weapons came closer and closer to her face. Naruto appeared, fast as lightning, his swords a mere blur to her. He deflected the weapons in the instant he passed her. Sakura held onto the ground with her ghost hand. With the other, she created a water platform, facing forward, just behind Naruto. She could almost feel the masked man's surprise. Naruto summoned wind chakra to his legs, lightening himself. He pushed against the water glyph, and rocketed forward like a cannonball. Despite his aversion to killing, The cross-slash he aimed at their opponent's face definitely did not feel as though he was just trying to knock him out. Instead of the man dropping dead, something else happened. Yellow lightning chakra exploded out of his tenketsu, and he managed to dodge the attack. Mostly. His mask fell off, cut in four. There was surprise likely that he actually had gotten hit on his face. Surprise that was also mirrored on her own, she was sure. Naruto only paused. He definitely had become better at hiding his emotions than most people gave him credit for. That's Neji. She wondered out loud. He apparently had been a sore subject to Hinata. No wonder. And now that he stood still, she finally noticed the red ring he was wearing around his finger. Something Naruto had told her meant one single thing. Hyuga Neji was apparently a member of Akatsuki's top brass. Check the description for the links to the author.